The candles burn low in the sick rooms of London, their light trembling against walls stained with damp and fear. Each flame fights the same invisible enemy, the air itself. Outside, the city no longer breathes, it moans. A single cough behind a door can send neighbors bolting their shutters. The sound of a bell no longer means prayer, it means another body, another bed stripped bare before dawn. It is the year 1849, and the Black Death has returned to the heart of Victorian London. Not the medieval spectre from old woodcuts and sermons, but something reborn, faster, crueler, and hungry for the crowded lungs of the living. The Thames moves thick and dark, carrying waste and whispers. Rats scurry through cellar doors, their eyes reflecting candlelight like tiny black mirrors. In the workhouses, fever climbs like ivy. In the mansions of Mayfair, the same chill finds its way under velvet sheets. Doctors mutter about miasma, about foul vapors, and God's punishment, as they carry vinegar-soaked cloths to their faces. Undertakers work by lamplight until the wax runs out. Streets fill not with the living but with silence, a silence heavy enough to drown a city. If you're listening now, don't move. Don't breathe too deeply. The air that once smelled of coal and rain now carries something older, something that remembers the Middle Ages. Today, we return to the year when progress met pestilence face to face, the Black Death, the plague that wiped out half of Victorian London. The candle burns low in the corner of the room, its flame trembling like a frightened thing. Wax drips onto the chipped saucer, each drop landing with a faint hiss. The air is thick, not with warmth, but with something that moves slower, heavier, as if it too is sick. The boarding house walls seem to lean closer, swollen with damp, their paper curling like skin after fever. Outside, a horse stumbles on the cobblestones. The sound of its shoes echoes through the alley, then fades into coughing not from the beast, but from the man guiding it. Another joins in, somewhere above, a rasp behind plaster. The smell in the room is a blend of boiled onions, smoke, and something sour, the scent that comes when breath no longer leaves clean. Mary Bell sits by the window, her hands folded in her lap, though there is nothing left to do with them. Her husband lies in the bed beside her, his body shivering under 2 layers of rough wool. His skin shines with sweat that never cools, his chest rising in short, quick gasps. Every exhale sounds like a hand dragging over gravel. She reaches for the basin and dips a rag into the water that is no longer clear. She presses it to his forehead. The heat underneath is frightening, not human anymore. She remembers when the coughing began in the next building. A woman named Ada, cheerful, always humming when she hung the washing. One morning, her song stopped. By nightfall, a cart had come for her, then another for her husband the next day, then for their little girl with the red shoes. No one went near their door again, though the smell stayed for days. Now the same silence has settled here, that strange, polite quiet that Londoners use to avoid the sound of dying. From the street below, a voice shouts something about vinegar and disinfectant. Another sells onions for warding off bad air. The plague doctor has not yet arrived. They say there are not enough of them. They move slowly, masked and cloaked, from one neighborhood to another, tracing the path of the dead like ghosts themselves. Mary wonders if they will come tonight or in the morning, and whether her husband will still be breathing when they do. A rat scurries along the wainscot, stopping to sniff the air before disappearing under the door. The candle flickers, as if startled. Mary stares at the small flame until her eyes blur, willing it to hold its shape. She remembers a time when light meant safety, when morning meant life continuing. But the mornings now arrive grey and reluctant, and each one feels thinner than the last. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. It is not the hour, it is the sound of the dead being carried through Whitechapel. One chime for each cart. They say you can count how bad the day has been by how long the ringing lasts. Tonight, it goes on and on. Mary listens, her hand still resting on her husband's arm, feeling the pulse beneath her fingertips slow to a tremor. When the candle dies, it goes quietly. The last wisp of smoke rises, curls, and vanishes, swallowed by the same air that has already taken him. The room falls still, except for her breathing, thin and uneven, like the city itself trying not to wake what it has already lost. The morning comes pale and grudging, as though London itself regrets waking. Fog rolls low over Brick Lane, carrying with it the stench of ash, sewage, and something else, something sweet and rotten that makes the stomach tighten. The market is nearly empty. The cries of vendors have thinned to whispers. The clatter of barrels and boots has turned to the soft scrape of wheels over wet stone. Rats move openly now, darting between piles of cabbage leaves and fish bones. No one bothers to chase them. They are too many, too quick, and too bold fat from the waste of the dead. At the far end of the lane, a small boy crouches beside a broken crate. His name is Thomas Dyer, though no one uses it. To most, he's just Tommy with the matchbox, the one who lights candles for the neighbors when the lamps go dark. His mother used to keep a stall here selling bread rolls and tea, but the stall has been closed for 3 weeks. Now Tommy sits in her place, wrapped in a coat that is his, holding a box of damp matches he can no longer sell. He watches the rats. They seem to know where the food is before the people do. From somewhere behind the tannery, a cart creaks into view. The driver wears a black scarf over his face, his hands wrapped in linen. He doesn't call out, everyone already knows what kind of cart it is. The wheels are slick with filth, and the canvas cover behind him sags under its weight. 2 men step from the shadows of a doorway to help him lift a body wrapped in sheets. The sound it makes, that soft, heavy thud, sends Tommy's matchbox clattering to the ground. The men do not notice him. They never do. The shop fronts are shuttered. Posters hang limp on the walls, warning of miasma and contagion. One reads, "Avoid unnecessary crowds." Another, pinned crookedly beside it, bears a single handprint blackened as though from soot or blood. The fog moves through the alleys like breath through a dying lung. It touches everything: the iron railings, the wash lines, the faces of those who linger too long in the cold. By midday, a single bread cart appears, drawn by a horse that looks as weary as its driver. A few women gather, their shawls drawn tight, eyes darting. They hold coins in gloved hands, afraid to touch the same loaf as another. Tommy watches from the curb, his stomach growling. The driver begins to shout prices, but his voice cracks halfway through. He coughs once, then again, harder, his shoulders jerking forward. The women scatter. The bread falls into the mud. The horse stands still, steam rising from its nostrils as the driver sinks to his knees. Tommy runs. He doesn't stop until he reaches the narrow stair behind his building. The door is ajar. Inside, the air is close and sour, but warm. His mother is still in bed, her back to the wall, her hair spread across the pillow like ink. "I brought you bread, Ma," he whispers, though his hands are empty. She doesn't stir. He kneels beside her, his breath quick and shallow, the sound of the market bells faint beyond the window. Outside, night falls early. The fog thickens again, crawling up the walls, pressing against the glass. In the street below, another cart passes. The wheels splash through water that isn't rain. The driver doesn't look up, he doesn't have to. Everyone in Brick Lane knows what follows behind him. The looking glass on Dr. Elias Hargreaves's desk has not been cleaned for days. A film of soot and candle smoke blurs his reflection until he hardly recognizes the face staring back. Hollow cheeks, red-rimmed eyes, a line of sweat along his collar. Behind him, the window shutters rattle against the wind, and the dim light from the gas lamps outside makes the mirror seem alive, as if something within it moves when he does not. He had once been a man of science and confidence. His instruments, arranged neatly along the wall, had gleamed with purpose. Stethoscope, scalpel, syringe, forceps. Now, they look like relics in a tomb, each coated with a fine dusting of despair. The city outside is quieter each day. From his surgery on Bishopsgate Street, Elias used to hear the rattle of omnibuses and the cries of hawkers. Now the only sounds are coughing and the toll of distant bells. He lights a new candle and leans close to the mirror. His fingers tremble as he examines the grey beneath his eyes. He tells himself it's only exhaustion, too many calls, too little sleep. But there's something else beneath the fatigue. The faint rasp in his throat that will not fade. He opens a drawer and pulls out a vial of laudanum. The amber liquid catches the candlelight, and for a moment he hesitates, the flame flickering against the glass like a heartbeat. He takes one careful sip, just enough to steady his nerves. A knock at the door breaks the silence. It's Mrs. Webley, the laundress from across the alley. Her shawl soaked through from the mist. Her eyes are red from crying. "It's my boy, sir," she says. "He won't wake." Elias pulls on his coat, grabs his bag, and follows her out into the night. The fog has thickened to a choking soup. Even the nearest lampposts glow faintly, their light swallowed whole before it reaches the cobblestones. The air tastes metallic, like iron and rain. They move slowly, following the gas lamps by memory. When they reach her door, he can smell it before he sees it, that blend of sickness and damp linen that no candle can mask. The child lies still on the cot, his lips blue, eyes half open. Elias kneels beside him and presses his ear to the boy's chest. Nothing, only silence, the kind that hums, the kind that fills the air after a scream. The mother sobs behind him, clutching her apron. He straightens slowly, his knees aching, and pulls the sheet over the child's face. It was quick. He lies. He didn't suffer. When he returns to his surgery, dawn is creeping through the fog. The streets are empty, save for a single cart moving toward the churchyard. He steps inside and closes the door behind him. His reflection waits for him in the mirror, pale and expectant. He removes his gloves and sees the faint trace of a rash along his wrist, just a few red marks, easy to ignore. He stares at them for a long moment. Then he snuffs out the candle, plunging the room into shadow. The mirror catches what little light remains, and for an instant he could swear it smiles back. The rain hasn't stopped for 3 days, and the sound of it has become a language. In the boarding houses of Spitalfields, it drips through cracks in the ceiling, trickling down the walls, seeping into the rotted floorboards like a steady, whispered warning. Beneath those planks, something else stirs faint movements, like breath or the shifting of cloth. No one wants to look. In this part of London, the dead often stay close. At number 16 Hanbury Street, the tenants move softly now. The coughing from the second floor has stopped, but no one celebrates. They heard the screams on the first night, the panicked voice of a child begging his mother to wake, then silence, followed by hurried footsteps and the dull scrape of furniture being pushed against a door. By morning, the hall reeked of vinegar and coal smoke. Mrs. Pratchett, who rents the front room on the ground floor, hasn't left her chair by the stove. She says she can still hear them, not the living, but the calm, the ones hidden under the boards. "It's the fever," mutters Mr. Greeley, the cobbler next door. "Gets in your head, makes you hear what's gone." But even he walks faster now when passing her door. There are sounds that reason cannot soften. The landlord, a thin man with hands always shaking from gin, sent for the undertakers 2 nights ago. They came late, wrapped in oilcloth, their boots leaving black streaks on the stairs. They carried no lanterns. The fog was too thick for light to travel. One of them slipped on the way down and tore the corner of the carpet, a small thing, but enough to reveal what lay beneath. For a moment, just a breath, a smell rose up so foul and sweet that all 3 men stopped breathing. They dragged the bodies out quickly after that, not daring to meet anyone's eyes, but the stench never truly left. Now, the boards creak even when no one walks across them. The walls seem to pulse with damp. In the night, the tenants hear it, the low, irregular sound of something shifting below. Some say it's the rats. Others whisper it's the sickness itself, moving through the wood like a tide. The floor seems to hum underfoot, as if alive, as if remembering every name of those who have died above it. Upstairs, A baby cries. It's Mrs. Finch's newborn, born 2 weeks early and already coughing. She rocks him near the window, whispering a lullaby drowned out by rain. Each breath the child takes sounds thinner, like paper tearing. Mrs. Finch presses her palm to the floorboards, feels the faint vibration beneath her, that same steady, sick rhythm. Hush now, she murmurs, though she isn't sure who she's speaking to, the baby, the dead, or the city itself. Outside, the street is almost silent. The fog clings to the lamps like wet cloth. Somewhere in the distance, a cart rumbles over cobblestones, its wheels grinding slowly to a stop. The driver calls out, voice muffled by rain, "Bring out your dead!" No one answers. But under the floorboards, the whisper comes again, soft, hollow and wet, as though something down there is trying to remember how to breathe. By the time the sky begins to pale above London's rooftops, the fever has already been awake for hours. It waits quietly, patient and invisible, settling on the skin of the living like dew. In the narrow wards of St. Mary's Infirmary, the night nurses move between beds lit only by candlelight. The air is heavy with breath and vinegar, with the faint rustle of sheets that never dry. Somewhere near the end of the hall, someone prays in a whisper that keeps breaking into coughs. Nurse Clara Hensley has been on her feet for 20 hours. Her apron is stiff with blood and sweat. She has forgotten what her own voice sounds like. Even her thoughts have grown thin and mechanical. Pulse, temperature, cloth, spoon, breathe. She moves to the next bed, a young girl whose hair clings to her forehead in dark ropes. The child's skin burns beneath her palm. Clara dips a rag into the basin beside her, but the water is warm. She wrings it out anyway and presses it gently to the girl's neck. The doctor's boots echo faintly down the corridor. Dr. Hargreaves, the same man who once lectured about sanitation and hope, now walks as if each step carries a confession. He stops at the doorway, nods to Clara, and examines the patient. "It's spreading faster," he murmurs, his eyes avoiding hers. "We'll need to close the ward to visitors." Clara almost laughs. There haven't been visitors in days. Fear has emptied the streets and the pews. Love itself has gone into hiding. At the far end of the room, 2 attendants lift a body from a bed and wrap it in a sheet. The movement is practiced, almost gentle, like tucking someone in for sleep. The body is that of a constable who had come in 2 nights earlier to help move the sick from Whitechapel. His badge is still pinned to his coat. Clara watches as they carry him out through the side door toward the courtyard. The rain has stopped, but the fog still clings to everything. Even the dead look as though they're breathing. She wipes her hands on her apron and glances toward the window. The first hint of morning glows faintly through the grime, pale and weak, more memory than light. For a moment, she imagines the city waking, shops opening, children running, bells ringing. But then she hears it again, the low, rhythmic sound that now replaces the morning chorus. Carts creaking, wheels grinding through mud, the sound of the dead being counted. A cry breaks the silence. The girl she had been tending to moments ago is convulsing, her small hands clawing at the air. Clara rushes to hold her, but the child's eyes have rolled white. A shudder, a gasp, and then stillness. The candle nearest them flickers once and dies. Clara stays kneeling beside the bed, her arms still around the little body, unwilling to let go. She feels the fever's breath on her neck, the heat that lingers after life leaves the room. Outside, the first sunlight tries to break through the fog, but it never quite succeeds. The dawn arrives, dull and grey, and the city wakes to another day of dying. In the courtyard below, the undertakers lift their shovels, their silhouettes blurred by steam rising from the earth. The fever waits, unseen, ready to begin again. The post office on Threadneedle Street smells of damp paper and paraffin. Stacks of envelopes sit unopened, their corners curling like old petals. The clerks have stopped sorting them, there are too few left to read, and even fewer to deliver. Most of the routes are impassable now, blocked by quarantined houses or guarded by men with red armbands. The plague has rewritten London's map in silence. turning familiar streets into forbidden zones. James Wilton used to pride himself on his punctuality. For 12 years he had walked the same route from Bishopsgate to Aldersgate, carrying news from the world beyond. Letters scented with perfume, bills folded with care, postcards smudged with coal dust. He used to nod to the lamplighters, trade greetings with shopkeepers, and deliver tiny moments of joy or dread sealed in wax. But now the wax seals are grimy, the names crossed out. He no longer knocks. He simply leaves the letters by the door, then steps back into the fog. He tries not to read them. But sometimes the temptation is too strong. This morning he pauses at a doorstep on Fleet Street and slides a finger under the flap of a letter addressed in a child's uneven scrawl. To my Da, working in the city. The paper inside trembles in his hand. Mama says the fever is gone now, the letter begins, but she still won't open the curtains. The house smells funny, and the doctor hasn't come back. The rest trails off in smeared ink. He folds it carefully and slips it back into the envelope. The door it belongs to is boarded shut, a single black X painted across the wood. As the day drags on, James's bag grows lighter. The city, it seems, has fewer people left to write to. At the corner of Ludgate Hill, he passes a man coughing into a handkerchief spotted red. A constable waves him away, his voice muffled by a mask soaked in vinegar. "No deliveries here," the constable says. "They've all gone." James nods, clutching the strap of his satchel, tighter, as though the letters inside might vanish if he lets go. By afternoon, the fog thickens again, swallowing whole streets. He follows the sound of church bells to find his way, each toll a guidepost, each echo another reminder of loss. He reaches the river by instinct, not sight, and sits on a bench, slick with mist. Across the Thames, silhouettes move slowly through the haze. Undertakers, perhaps, or priests. He can't tell anymore. From his coat pocket, he pulls one last letter. The address reads Mrs. Clara Wilton, 18 Rosemary Court. His wife. He had written it weeks ago, promising to come home soon, to bring bread, to stay safe. But every time he tried to post it, another district closed. He stares at the envelope, now the paper damp, the ink bleeding, and wonders whether there's still a house or a wife waiting to receive it. He tears it open and reads the words he already knows by heart. Then, with hands that no longer feel like his own, he drops the letter into the dark river. It floats for a moment, turning slowly, before the current pulls it under. That evening, the post office burns its undelivered mail in the courtyard, letters to the dead, prayers to the unreachable. The smoke rises through the fog and mingles with the city's breath, carrying thousands of words that will never be read. And somewhere downstream, beneath the grey water, a single envelope drifts past the drowned arches of London Bridge, still sealed against the world that forgot how to answer. At the bend where Bleeding Lane meets Bishopsgate, a single gas lamp flickers over a narrow doorway. The sign above it, Mrs. Keen's Lodgings, is barely legible now, half-eaten by soot and rain. The curtains have been drawn for weeks, but a faint light still glows behind them, the stubborn pulse of a house trying not to die. Inside, the rooms are close and airless. Wallpaper peels from the plaster like burned skin, and the scent of damp wood mingles with something far worse, the thick sweetness of decay. Mrs. Keen moves through it like a ghost, her apron tied tight at the waist, a candle cupped in one trembling hand. She's grown thin since the sickness began, though she tells herself it's from fasting, not fear. The Lord tests the faithful, she whispers whenever the coughing upstairs begins again. There are 6 rooms in her house, though only 3 are occupied now. The others are sealed, the doors nailed shut, linen stuffed in the cracks to keep the air from escaping. Behind one of them lies the Smith family, who arrived from Wapping 2 months ago with bright faces and a promise of rent paid in advance. The husband lasted a week. The wife, 2 more. The child, she doesn't think of the child. She tells herself that silence is mercy. Tonight, a wind has risen outside, pushing against the windows until they groan in their frames. The candle flame flutters, and Mrs. Keene shields it with her hand. She stops at the base of the staircase and listens. For a moment, there is only the storm. Then, faintly, from the upper floor, a floorboard creaks. Another follows, slower, deliberate. Her mouth goes dry. "Mr. Alden?" she calls softly. No answer. The coffer in the attic hasn't made a sound since yesterday morning. She climbs the steps one at a time, the boards complaining under her weight. The smell grows stronger, with each rise a sourness that burns the throat. She reaches the attic door and presses her ear against it. Nothing. Then, just as she starts to turn away, a whisper seeps through the wood. It's not speech, more like breath, drawn out and trembling. She fumbles with the latch. The door sticks, swollen by damp, and she pushes harder. The room inside is almost black. The window has been nailed shut, but a thin line of fog curls through a crack in the frame. The bed is empty, sheets tangled. On the floor beside it, the candle she left last night has melted into a puddle of wax. She kneels beside it, eyes scanning the room. Then she sees them footprints, faint but visible, leading from the bedside toward the corner where the wallboards don't quite meet. A section of the floor has been pried open. A draught rises from the gap, warm and foul. She leans closer, candle trembling in her hand. For a heartbeat, she thinks she sees movement, something shifting beneath the boards. Then, from deep below, comes a sound that freezes her blood, a slow exhale, wet and human. The candle slips from her fingers and falls. The flame flares, catches the wax, then gutters out. Darkness swallows the attic. In the black, the breathing continues, not hurried, not gasping, but calm, as if whatever lies beneath Bleeding Lane has all the time in the world. Downstairs, the storm rattles the windows. The city coughs, the river groans, and Mrs. Keene stands alone at the edge of the open floor, her candle gone, her prayer half-spoken, the house holding its breath with her. By late summer, the river had turned black. It moved sluggishly through the heart of London, a vast, glistening vein of disease. At high tide, the current pushed against the embankments like a living thing, carrying with it the city's secrets refused from the slaughterhouses, rotted vegetables, human waste, dead dogs, and sometimes worse. The smell was everywhere. It crawled through window cracks, clung to curtains, seeped into dreams. Even the rich could not escape it. They simply called it the miasma and closed their windows tighter. From the steps of Blackfriars Bridge, one could watch the river shimmer under the weak sunlight, a sheet of oily color shifting between brown and green. Barges still drifted by, though few dared to row anymore. The water foamed and bubbled like a cauldron. "The city's blood," a boatman once said, before the fever took him. Now his skiff lies half sunk at the shore, its rope still tied to a post, as if he might return for it. Sarah Morton stands at the railing, her shawl drawn over her nose. She has come from her house near Smithfield Market, searching for her husband's body. He worked the night shifts unloading coal from the docks, a hard man, quick to laugh, slower to speak. He hadn't returned in 4 days. When the constable stopped coming by with updates, she knew she would have to look herself. The wind off the water burns her eyes, carrying the stench of rot and something metallic, like blood. She watches as a shape floats past. A crate, then another. Then, caught against a piling, a pale arm. Her hands clutch the iron rail. "God forgive us," she whispers. But the river has already drowned his answer. Across the way, near the tower, workers in masks toss quicklime into the water, hoping to calm the smell. The powder blooms white for a moment before vanishing beneath the surface. "It'll do no good," mutters a man beside her, his face hidden under a brimmed hat. The filth runs deeper than they see. No. He spits into the river, then walks away without another word. When the wind shifts, it carries the stench toward Westminster. There, inside Parliament, gentlemen argue over sewage plans and costs, while pressing scented handkerchiefs to their faces. One minister insists it is not the air that spreads the plague, but the people, the unwashed, the poor, the careless. Outside, a clerk collapses in the street, blood on his lips, his papers scattering like white feathers into the water. By dusk, the river's surface glows with reflected lamplight, beautiful from a distance, deadly up close. Sarah kneels by the edge, her eyes fixed on the slow-moving current. She thinks she sees something rise, a coat, a shoulder, the suggestion of a face, but before she can reach, the tide pulls it away. She stays there until the lamps are lit and the barges cease to move, until the wind turns colder and the fog begins to creep up river. The city behind her hums with fever and silence. The Thames keeps flowing, black and endless, bearing the weight of every name London has already forgotten. And somewhere beneath the rippling surface, the water breathes thick, patient, and full of the dead. In the crooked spine of Fleet Street, where the fog thickens first at dusk, a narrow doorway bears the faded lettering J. Penrose and Sons, Remedies and Curiosities. The window is a graveyard of glass bottles, amber, green, and blue, each one clouded with dust and mystery. Inside, the air hums with the strange sweetness of crushed herbs and something darker. The metallic tang of mercury, the sharp perfume of chloroform, the whisper of things that promise healing but often deliver sleep. Jonathan Penrose was once a man of reputation, consulted by doctors, trusted by ladies who fainted easily, and men who drank too much. But since the fever came, his trade has changed. The wealthy no longer visit, they've fled to the country. The poor come instead, shuffling in from the alleys with hollow eyes and shaking hands, clutching coins still warm from their palms. They don't ask for medicine, they ask for mercy in a bottle. He gives it to them, of course. Laudanum, ether, tincture of opium, all labeled in his careful handwriting. He tells himself it's kindness. He tells himself they deserve peace. Yet when he closes the shop at night, the lies grow heavier. The fog seeps through the keyhole and fills the room like a ghost, curling around his shelves and books, whispering the names of those who never woke. This evening, a young woman appears at the counter. Her dress is torn at the hem, her gloves smeared with soot. She doesn't look up when she speaks. They said you have something that makes the coughing stop. Her voice cracks on the word stop. Jonathan studies her, the tremor in her hand, the pallor beneath her powdered face. For yourself, he asks. For my brother, she says. He's only 12. She places a single shilling on the counter. He hesitates, then turns to a locked cabinet. From it, he retrieves a small vial filled with translucent gold liquid. 3 drops, he says. No more. It will ease his breath. She nods, quickly, pocketing the bottle. He watches her leave, swallowed by the fog, before she reaches the corner. Only when the door closes does he realize her shilling is still on the counter. He picks it up, turning it in the lamplight. The coin feels heavy, colder than metal should be. He sets it aside and pours himself a measure of brandy. His hands shake as he drinks. Behind him, something rattles, a bottle falling from a shelf, rolling to a stop at his feet. He bends to retrieve it, and the label catches his eye. Tincture of belladonna, deadly nightshade. A few drops numb pain. A few more stop the heart. He remembers the first batch he made, weeks ago, when the fever was just a rumor. A mother had begged him to save her daughter. When the child began to scream from the pain, Jonathan had added a few extra drops. The girl's breathing slowed, then stilled. He had told the mother it was peace. She had kissed his hands in gratitude. Now, every night, he counts the vials in that same cabinet, the ones he swears he won't sell again. But as the city darkens outside and the fog presses harder against the windows, he hears another knock at the door. A man's voice, low and desperate. "Please, sir." She won't stop coughing. Jonathan stares at the bottles glowing softly in the lamplight, their liquid hearts pulsing like gold. He reaches for the key in his pocket. The knock comes again, louder this time. The fog curls beneath the door, patient, expectant. With a sigh that feels like confession, the apothecary unlocks the cabinet. The bells of Street Clements had once marked the rhythm of the city, the hours, the weddings, the births, the steady turning of London's endless clockwork, but now they hang silent above the parish, heavy with rust and soot. Pigeons nest between their arches, feathers drifting through the open slats like snow. The ropes below lie slack and unmoving, coiled like dead serpents on the church floor. The sexton, old Mr. Broom, still comes each morning to polish the brass and sweep the steps, though no congregation remains to see his devotion. Habit, perhaps, or hope disguised as duty. Inside, the pews are empty, except for dust. A single candle flickers near the altar, set there by Father Aldrich before he left for the hospital ward 3 weeks ago. He had promised to return by Sunday Mass, but Sunday came and went without him. The candle has been replaced many times since, by Mr. Broom, by the washerwoman from across the lane, by a child once who left a small wooden cross beside. The flame never lasts the night. The fog slips through the cracks, smothering it in its sleep. Outside, the graveyard swells. Graves too shallow, too fresh. Wooden markers stand at crooked angles, names smeared by rain. There's no time for sermons anymore, just the dull rhythm of spades and the grunt of tired men. A boy rings a small handbell at the gate to warn passers-by, but even that sound has grown faint. The fog eats it before it travels 10 paces. At dusk, Mr. Broom climbs the bell tower. His knees ache with every step, but he keeps going, clutching the railing as though climbing toward heaven itself. When he reaches the top, he pulls at the nearest rope, testing its weight. The bell does not move. He tries again, harder, the effort shaking his whole body. Still nothing, only a deep, metallic groan, like the sound of the city's heart refusing to beat. He wipes the sweat from his brow and looks out over London. From here, the rooftops look drowned chimneys, jutting from the fog like the masts of a sunken fleet. The air tastes of ash and salt. Somewhere far below, a cart rolls past, wheels echoing like muffled thunder. He imagines he can smell the lime from the burial pits. He imagines he can hear Father Aldrich's voice reciting the last rites in a ward full of coughing souls. He grips the rope again, muttering a prayer for the living and the dead. On the third pull, something gives not a sound, but a vibration that hums through the wood, through his bones, through the fog itself. Then, silence. The bell remains motionless. Mr. Broom lets the rope fall and sinks to his knees. His breath comes in short bursts, each one tasting of rust. He presses his forehead to the cold stone floor and whispers, "Forgive us, Lord, for forgetting how to call your name." Down below, the city exhales a long, low sigh of steam and sorrow. The last candle at Street Clements gutters and dies, and the bell that once summoned London's soul stands mute, its mouth forever closed. By morning, the sexton will not be found. Only his broom remains, propped neatly by the door, and above the silent church, the bell waits patient, suspended, deaf to the dead who pass beneath it. By the time night returned to Spitalfields, the sound of wheels had become as familiar as rain. Wooden, uneven, echoing through the alleys, the carts of the dead. They came before dawn and after dusk, their axles squealing beneath the weight of their cargo. The drivers called softly as they went, not shouting anymore, just murmuring the old warning, "Bring out your dead." The words drifted through shutters and cracks, through dreams and fever, until even the living started to answer. Tonight, the cart stops at the corner of Dorset Street. The driver, a man with hollow cheeks and a scarf tied over his nose, wipes his brow with a trembling hand. The smell has grown worse since the fog returned thick and sweet, clinging to the back of his throat. He can't remember the last time he could breathe clean air. His name is Samuel Holt, though no one calls him that anymore. To most, he's just the collector. He lifts his lantern and knocks on the nearest door. "It's time," he says. Silence. Then, from inside, a woman's voice, thin, frightened. "They're not gone yet. Please." He's still breathing. Samuel hesitates. This happens more often now. People no longer trust their own senses. They've seen too much death to believe life can still be present in what lies before them. He pushes the door open gently. The room inside is lit by a single candle. On the bed lies a man, pale and still, his chest fluttering with shallow breaths. The woman sits beside him, clutching his hand, her eyes red from crying. "He'll wake soon," she whispers. "He just needs rest." Samuel steps closer and lays 2 fingers against the man's throat. The pulse is faint, but it's there. "Then I'll come back in the morning," he says quietly. She nods, her grip tightening on the hand she refuses to release. Outside, another man waits beside the cart. A newcomer hired just yesterday. He doesn't speak much. When Samuel lifts the tarp to reveal the night's collection, the man flinches. The bodies are wrapped in linen, stacked carefully to prevent the shifting that used to haunt Samuel's dreams. But tonight, one of the bundles moves. He freezes. The newcomer swears under his breath. Samuel pulls back the corner of the sheet, and a pair of eyes stare up at him, glazed, unfocused, but open. The woman inside must have made the same mistake as so many others. He kneels beside the body, presses his ear to the chest. A heartbeat weak but steady. The newcomer recoils. "What do we do?" he whispers. Samuel looks toward the fog-drowned street, then back at the man in the cart. "We take him to the infirmary," he says. The words sound hollow even to him. The infirmaries are full. Most of the doctors have fled or died. Still, he lifts the man carefully, ignoring the protests of his aching back. "Help me," he says. Together, they set off down the street, the wheels of the cart whispering over the stripped cobblestones. The fog curls around them, hiding the world in pale folds. Every few steps, Samuel listens for the faint sound of breath from the back. Once, twice, then nothing. He stops walking. The silence is complete. He lowers his head. There's no time for prayer. The newcomer stands behind him, shivering. "We could have left him," he mutters. Samuel doesn't answer. He just covers the man again, gently this time, and drives on. By dawn, the cart is lighter, but Samuel feels heavier. When he reaches the burial ground, he unloads the last body and stands watching as the lime is thrown. For a moment, he swears he can still hear a heartbeat not from the pit, but from within his own chest, slow, heavy, and uncertain. Then the bells begin to toll again, faint and uneven, and the cart turns toward the next street. The city still needs its collector. At first light, when even the undertakers are still asleep, the rag-pickers take to the streets. They move like ghosts through the fog, silent, bent figures wrapped in layers of rags that make them look more shadow than flesh. Among them is Nell Harcourt, a woman of 50 who has seen more winters than she cares to count. Her fingers are raw and cracked from cold, her nails blackened with soot. Around her waist hangs a rope from which clink tin spoons, buttons, and bits of wire, trophies of survival. She used to wash linens for the tavern on Brushfield Street, but that was before the sickness emptied the rooms and the tavern keeper boarded up his doors. Now Nell scavenges what she can from the heaps of refuse that line the alleys. Scraps of fabric, half-burnt candles, pieces of lace too stained for the living but precious to the desperate. She sells them to the pawnbroker, who doesn't ask where they come from. He knows better. This morning, the fog lies low and thick, muting every sound except the steady tap of her stick against the stones. She keeps to the edges of the road, away from the carts and from the houses marked with red. The smell is worst near the river, a sour, coppery scent that clings to everything. But that's where the best finds are. The dead leave behind fine things, and Nell has learned to look without looking too closely. In a doorway near the tannery, she spots a bundle of cloth. She kneels, peering through the haze. A man's coat, fine wool, barely worn. She lifts it carefully, shaking the damp from the sleeves. Something heavy slips from the pocket and clatters to the ground. A silver watch, its chain broken. Her heart stirs at the sight, not for greed, but for memory. Her husband once carried such a watch, before the fever took him in the spring. She tucks it into her bag and stands, her knees cracking. That's when she hears it, a sound beneath the fog, faint and rhythmic, breathing. She turns back to the doorway. The coat had covered more than rags. A hand lies beneath it, thin and motionless. Nell crouches again, the fog swirling between them like breath. The man is young, his face pale but not yet still. His eyes flutter when she touches his shoulder. "You're alive," she whispers, as if afraid the city might overhear. He doesn't answer. His lips move, but no words come out. She glances down the street. No carts, no watchman, no help, only fog. She bites her lip and makes a decision she will later regret. With surprising strength, she drags him into the shadows of a nearby archway and covers him with her shawl. "Rest now," she says, though her voice trembles. "I'll fetch the doctor." But the doctors no longer come to this part of London. By the time she returns with nothing but a cup of stale water and a prayer, he is gone. His hand, the one she had touched, has stiffened. The fog has thickened around him, tender as a shroud. Nell sits beside him for a long time, the city waking slowly beyond the veil. She opens his fingers and finds a coin pressed into his palm, a half-sovereign, still warm. She closes his hand again and whispers, "Keep it." Then she stands, shoulders shaking, and disappears into the fog, with the rags clinking at her side. When the carts come later, they find only the body and a trail of small silver buttons leading away bright as tears against the stones. In the grand parlours of Mayfair, where chandeliers still glitter above wilting flowers and the wallpaper smells faintly of lavender, the word plague is never spoken aloud. The servants whisper it behind closed doors, but the masters prefer the illness, the fever, the inconvenience. They've sealed themselves in with perfume and pride, trusting that money can outwit death. For now, the illusion holds, but the air in the drawing rooms has begun to taste of dust and fear. At number 14 Grosvenor Square, Lady Eleanor Whitcomb insists on her afternoon tea, as though the world beyond her curtains still turns. The silver is polished, the porcelain cups shine. Her maid, Clara, pours with a steady hand, though her own complexion has grown pale. The windows are latched, the fire is kept high, and the scent of bergamot floats in the heavy air. "If one allows panic," Lady Eleanor declares, stirring her cup, "then one may as well invite death to sit at the table." Her husband, Lord Whitcomb, has not left his study in 3 days. He reads the newspapers obsessively, columns filled with figures, denials, and reports of empty hospitals. Occasionally, the silence from upstairs is broken by the sound of coughing. He pretends not to hear it. The servants exchange glances, moving more quietly with each passing day. The butler has taken to sleeping near the door, the key tucked in his vest, in case the authorities come to seal the house. This afternoon, the doctor arrives, summoned by telegraph and fear. He's young, his face still boyish beneath the mask tied across his mouth. He removes his gloves as Lady Eleanor leads him to the staircase. "Just a touch of the vapours," she says briskly. "My niece has always been delicate." The girl's room smells of rosewater and camphor. She lies in bed, motionless except for the faint rise of her chest. The doctor lifts her wrist. Her pulse flutters like the wing of a dying bird. "You must isolate her," he says, quietly. "Completely." Lady Eleanor stiffens. She is family. She will stay under this roof. "Then no one leaves it," he replies. When the doctor departs, his boots echo down the marble hall like a metronome marking the end of civility. The front door locks behind him. The house grows quieter than a church after Mass. Clara brings the tea tray to the parlour, but leaves it untouched, the cups trembling faintly on their saucers. In the nursery, dust motes drift in the slanted light. The canary in its cage has stopped singing. By nightfall, Lord Whitcomb breaks his silence. He stands by the window, looking down at the empty square, the gas lamps flickering through the fog. "Do you hear it?" he asks his wife. She shakes her head. But he does faint bells in the distance, carried by the wind, and beneath them the groan of a cart. At midnight, the niece's breathing stops. Clara wraps her in white sheets and places a sprig of lavender on her chest, though her hands tremble so badly she nearly drops it. Lady Eleanor orders that the door be nailed shut. "For propriety," she whispers. In the parlour, the tea has gone cold. The silver spoon rests beside the untouched sugar bowl. When dawn breaks, it finds the house locked tight, the windows sealed, the air unmoving, a gilded tomb in a city gasping for breath. The sewing room above Brewer Street used to hum like a hive. The steady pulse of needles, the clatter of shears, the rhythm of women stitching their small wages into the city's fabric, it had been a kind of music. But now the hum has quieted to a whisper. Only one lamp burns, its flame shaking whenever the wind slides down the chimney. Beside it sits Ada Finch, bent over a length of white muslin that glows faintly in the gloom, her fingers trembling with each stitch. She works because stopping would mean listening, and listening means hearing the city die. The coughing outside, the wheels of the death carts, the footsteps that come once and never return. So she sews. Each stitch is a heartbeat, each thread a prayer. The fabric smells faintly of soap and candle smoke, though underneath it lingers something sour, a reminder that even cloth can rot. Her sister Lily lies in the next room, fevered and thin. The doctor who came 2 nights ago left a bottle of brown liquid and instructions Ada cannot bear to follow. "It'll ease her pain," he'd said, but Ada remembers the neighbours who drank it and how none of them woke, so she sits by the lamp instead, sewing through the night, as if her hands can hold time still. The dress she's working on isn't for a client. The orders have long stopped coming. No one in Soho buys gowns anymore, not for weddings, not for church, not even for burial. This one is for Lily. She began it weeks ago, before the coughing started, when they still dreamed of finding better work in the West End. It was meant to be worn under light and laughter, not lamplight and grief. Now, the hem trails across the floor like a ghost's breath. The clock on the wall ticks unevenly, its pendulum scraping like a tired heartbeat. Ada's needle slips, pricking her thumb. A small bead of blood blooms on the fabric. She stares at it, the red stark against the pale muslin, then wipes it away with the corner of her sleeve. For a blip moment, her vision swims. The air feels heavier, thicker. She blinks and forces herself to keep sewing. From the other room, Lily stirs. A soft moan. Ada rushes to her side. Her sister's eyes are open now, wide and glassy, unfocused. "It's cold," she whispers. Ada takes her hand, surprised by how light it feels, as if the bones have hollowed. "I'm here," she says. "Just rest, love. I'm nearly done with your dress." Lily's gaze drifts toward the window, where the fog presses like a curious face against the glass. She smiles faintly. "It's snowing," she murmurs. But it isn't snow. It's ash drifting from the chimneys of the burned-out houses down the street. When Ada looks back, her sister's smile has frozen. The stillness is absolute. The clock stops ticking. The lamp hisses softly as it burns itself out. By morning, the sewing room will be silent again. The dress lies folded at the foot of the bed, perfectly finished, untouched. Outside, the first cart of the day rattles past, its wheels cutting through the hush of dawn. No one hears the door open, or sees the woman who steps out carrying a bundle wrapped in muslin, walking slowly into the fog with her head bowed, a seamstress delivering her last piece. The river mist creeps early into Limehouse, rolling low between the narrow lanes where the warehouses lean like weary giants. Even the gulls are quiet now, their cries muffled by fog thick as wool. Along the wharves, rats scurry between sacks of grain and coal dust. The air tastes of tar, brine, and sickness, a stench so heavy it coats the tongue. In one of the old storehouses, under a broken window and a roof that leaks brown rain, a small boy curls beneath a pile of canvas, his breath forming weak clouds in the cold. They call him Jonah, though no one knows if that's truly his name. The dock workers used to toss him crusts of bread when he'd linger near the cranes. But the docks are quiet now, the men either dead or gone inland. Jonah hasn't spoken to anyone in days. He's learned to survive by silence, by listening to the rats, to the river, to the coughs that echo through the brick walls at night. The storehouse used to hold sugar from the Indies, now it holds bodies. The carts come at dawn, their wheels dragging over the cobblestones like chains. The drivers shout for help, but no one answers. Jonah watches from the shadows as they stack the shrouded figures near the water's edge, waiting for the priests who never arrive. When the carts leave, he crawls out, searching the pockets of the dead for coins or bread. He does not look at their faces anymore. Today the tide is low, and the river has retreated, revealing the slime-coated ribs of old ships sunk long ago. Jonah wanders down the steps to the mud, where something glints between the stones. A small brass locket, half buried. He pries it free and wipes it on his sleeve. Inside is a faded miniature of a woman with dark eyes and a kind mouth. He stares at it for a long time, then slips it around his neck. The weight feels strange, like belonging. The fog thickens again by noon. He climbs back to the warehouse and crawls beneath his canvas shelter. Hunger claws at him. Somewhere close, a bell tolls once, then stops. He closes his eyes, trying to remember the sound of voices, his mother's, perhaps, though he can't recall her face. Instead, he dreams of water endless, cold, and full of stars. A noise wakes him. Footsteps, soft and cautious. He holds his breath. A figure appears through the gloom, a woman wrapped in rags, her arms full of something wrapped in white. She moves like a ghost, setting her burden gently on the floor. "Sleep now," she murmurs. Then she notices Jonah, frozen in the corner. Their eyes meet. "You shouldn't be here," she whispers. "I live here," he says, voice small. The woman nods slowly. "Then say a prayer for us both." She pulls her shawl tighter and slips away into the fog. Jonah creeps closer to what she left behind. Beneath the sheet lies a child, still and small, younger than him, but not by much. He backs away, clutching the locket at his throat. The warehouse feels colder now, as though the fog has found a way inside. When dawn comes again, the carts return. Jonah watches them from the shadows, the brass locket gleaming faintly beneath his chin. One of the men calls out, "Any others inside?" Jonah opens his mouth, but no sound comes. He stays hidden, unseen, as they carry the small bundle away. Only after they're gone does he whisper into the silence, "Goodbye." Outside, the river swells with the tide, dark and endless. The boy sits at the window, staring at the water, clutching the locket tight, the only proof that he is still alive in a city that has forgotten how to care who lives or dies. By the autumn of that terrible year, London no longer seemed built of brick and stone, but of vapor and decay. The mist had grown thicker, heavier, no longer drifting as before, but moving with intent, curling through the streets like smoke from some unseen furnace. It clung to skin, to glass, to the iron gates of the churchyards. Some swore they heard it whisper, that it carried voices the size of the dying, the mutters of the lost. Whether madness or truth, no one dared linger long enough to find out. From her attic window on Cannon Street, young Bess Wren could watch the fog rise each morning, spilling between the chimneys like milk. Her father had called it the city's breath when she was small, back when it still seemed harmless, a soft grey veil that made the gaslights glow like stars. But now it was thicker, darker, full of movement that didn't belong. When she wiped the window pane with her sleeve, she could see her reflection looking back pale, wide-eyed, and ghostly, as though she were already part of it. Below her, the street had become a blur of sound, cartwheels turning slow, hooves slipping on the wet cobbles, distant coughing echoing through the lanes. The neighbors had started keeping their doors bolted, their windows stuffed with rags. Even the watchmen moved in pairs now, carrying lamps that barely pierced the gloom. There was talk of the fog poisoning, the air of it creeping into lungs and houses alike, carrying the fever from one home to the next. Bess's mother had stopped leaving her bed 2 weeks ago. "It's the damp," she'd said, her voice rasping like torn cloth. Once the sun returns, I'll rise. But the sun hadn't returned in months. Each dawn arrived the same, pale, choked, unfinished. The girl tended to her as best she could, fetching water from the pump, though even that smelled wrong, faintly metallic. She would sit by the bedside and hum old songs her mother used to sing while mending shirts, trying to drown out the sounds outside, the muffled cries, the shouts, the endless roll of the carts. That evening, the fog pressed so hard against the windows that the candlelight turned green. Bess rose to shut the latch but froze when she saw it, a handprint blooming on the other side of the glass. Small, wet, as if someone or something had leaned close to breathe. She stumbled backward, her heart hammering. But when she looked again, it was gone. Only her own reflection stared back, blurred by condensation. In the next room, her mother stirred, coughing deep and wet. "Close the window," she whispered. "It's getting in." Bess did as she was told, shoving a blanket into the crack beneath the sill. The air inside already felt thinner, harder to draw. The candle flickered wildly, and for a moment she thought she saw the flame bend toward the window as if pulled by something outside. She sat on the floor, wrapping her shawl tight, listening to the rhythm of her mother's breathing, slower now, uneven. The mist pushed harder against the glass. It didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like lungs, like the city itself inhaling. By morning, the window was open again. The fog had filled the room, gentle as a tide. Bess lay beside her mother, both still and pale, their faces calm as though asleep. Outside, the mist rolled on, spilling into the next street, whispering softly through the cracks of every door it passed, alive, endless, and learning. The medical theatre of St. Bartholomew's Hospital had always smelled faintly of alcohol and chalk, but now the scent was fouled by something heavier, the sickly sweet perfume of decay. The long benches that once filled with eager students were half empty, their occupants pale and silent. They did not take notes anymore, they only watched. There were no lectures on the virtues of science now, no polite applause when a specimen was revealed, only the scrape of metal against bone and the wet whisper of flesh being divided for answers that refused to come. Dr. Elias Hargreaves stood under the gaslight, his shadow stretching like a stain across the tiled floor. Before him lay the newest subject, a woman, unclaimed and unnamed, brought from the cholera ward by a pair of undertakers. Her hands were folded neatly over her chest, as if the living world had wanted to offer her one last gesture of grace before surrendering her to study. He adjusted his mask, though it did nothing, against the smell. The students leaned forward, eyes wide, their faces hidden behind handkerchiefs soaked in carbolic. "Observe the lungs," he said, his voice roughened by sleepless nights. "Note the discoloration, the lesions here." His gloved fingers trembled slightly as he lifted one side of the rib cage. The flesh beneath gleamed black and marbled with grey, like smoke caught in glass. "This," he continued, "is what fear looks like when it settles into the body." No one laughed at the attempt at poetry. One of the younger students, a boy not much older than 15, swallowed hard and turned away. The sound of it echoed in the silence. Elias paused. Once, he had spoken of the body with reverence, with the awe of a man mapping God's finest creation. Now, it felt like desecration. He looked down at the woman's face, at the faint streaks of soot across her cheek. There was a time he might have wondered who she had been, a maid perhaps, or a mother. But curiosity had become dangerous. It made the work personal, and the work had to be done. He drew the scalpel again. Outside, the fog pressed against the high windows like a living thing, dulling the light. From somewhere beyond the courtyard came the toll of a distant bell, slow, deliberate, unending. Elias's assistant, a sharp-featured man named Ward, looked up at the sound. "That makes 13 today," he muttered. "They'll run out of burial space before the week's out." Elias didn't answer. He was tracing the edge of a wound that had not been made by him. "See here," he murmured. "Hemorrhage before death." She drowned from within. A ripple of unease passed through the room. The boy who'd turned away now whispered, "From the air, sir? Or the water?" Elias hesitated before replying. "Both," he said at last, "and neither. It moves through us like a thought." When the demonstration ended, he remained behind. The students filed out, their boots echoing down the corridor. Elias washed his hands, watching the blood spiral away down the drain. His reflection in the basin water shimmered, breaking and reforming a man divided by his own work. He turned to cover the body, but the woman's eyes had fallen open, cloudy and pale. For one shattering instant, he thought he saw them flicker not with life, but with something older, something that had been watching him all along. He froze, breath caught in his throat. The fog outside shifted, and the window pane rattled softly, as though exhaling. Elias drew the sheet over her face. When he finally left the room, the lamp still burned. Behind him, the flame bent toward the covered form on the table, as if drawn by breath. And in the quiet that followed, the anatomy theatre sighed a long, hollow sound that might have been wind, or the city itself learning how to fear. The lamps along Whitechapel Road glow dimly tonight, weak, uncertain orbs swallowed by the thick fog that has rolled in from the river. Constable Henry Cole pulls his scarf higher around his mouth as he makes his rounds, his boots slick with mud and soot. The air bites his lungs, but the cold is a mercy. It masks the stench. He used to walk this beat with a whistle between his teeth, and a kind word for every shopkeeper who nodded from their doorstep. But the doors are shut now, the shutters nailed fast, and the only voices that answer him are coughing ones that drift through walls. His orders are simple. Mark the infected houses, escort the undertakers, keep order among the frightened. He has been keeping order for 15 years, through fires, riots, and storms, but nothing like this. The city itself feels diseased, the very stones sweat. Even the gas lights flicker, as if afraid to burn too bright. He stops outside a butcher's shop, its window crusted with grime. A paper, notice curls on the door, closed by order of the sanitation office. He dips his brush into the pot of red paint, slung at his side, and draws a single X on the doorframe. It's a simple act, but it feels like a sentence. Somewhere behind the door, he hears movement, soft, uneven breathing. A child, maybe. He hesitates, hand tightening around the handle of his truncheon. "Stay inside," he calls, though his voice comes out more like a plea than a command. At the next corner, he finds a body slumped against a lamppost. A man, perhaps 30, his coat torn, his skin shining with fever. Henry crouches, checking for a pulse. There is one, faint but real. "Hold on, lad," he mutters. But the man's eyes snap open, wide and glassy, and his lips part in a whisper Henry can barely catch. "It's in the air," the man says. Then he coughs, a wet, rattling sound that splatters crimson across Henry's glove. The constable staggers back, his heartbeat thunders in his ears. He wants to help, but his training and his fear root him to the spot. By the time he gathers courage to move forward, the man has gone still. He drags the body to the curb and covers it with his coat. "Forgive me," he murmurs. His voice sounds small in the fog. From deeper in the lane comes a rumble, the cart again, wheels grinding over cobblestones. The collector nods to him as they pass, faces hidden behind cloth masks. Henry watches them load the body and vanish into the mist, leaving behind only the faint smell of lye. He continues his patrol, each step heavier than the last. His lantern flickers, the glass smudged by his trembling hand. He passes a row of tenements where candles burn in every window, tiny signals of endurance or desperation. He lifts his notebook, records the address, and moves on. By the time he reaches Aldgate, the fog has thickened into blindness. He can't tell where the road ends and the sky begins. His breath comes shallow, each inhale sharp as glass. He leans against a wall, dizzy. His glove leaves a red smear where it touches the brick. For a moment, he can't remember which house he marked or how many doors he's passed. The world has shrunk to the glow of his lantern and the weight in his chest. Somewhere ahead, a bell tolls slow, deliberate, and close. He takes a step toward it, then another. The sound grows softer, as if moving away from him. His boots slip on the wet stones. The lantern falls, glass shattering. When dawn comes, the patrol finds the red pot spilled beside the lamppost, the brush still wet. The last X Henry Cole ever painted is smeared across the stones, running like blood into the gutter. And above it, in the thickening morning fog, the bell continues to toll, marking a city where even the guardians have begun to fall. The prayer book had belonged to her mother, soft leather, worn smooth by decades of trembling hands, its pages thin as breath. Now, every morning Mrs. Margaret Henshaw opens it at her table by the window, though the words swim before her eyes and the light grows dimmer each day. The fog presses close, the glass cold beneath her fingertips. Somewhere below, a cart rattles down the lane. She does not look anymore. She has learned to recognize the sound of its wheels, the creak of the driver's seat, the rhythm of ropes pulled taut over weight. Her husband's hat still hangs by the door. She dusts it each morning, as though he might return for it. The fever took him in June, a quick, merciless sickness that began with a cough and ended in silence before the week was out. She buried him with his pipe and a handful of lavender, the same she grows in the small pot on her sill. It blooms still, though the color has dulled to gray. Margaret reads aloud from Psalms, her voice breaking at the edges. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, she pauses. The words no longer feel distant or holy. They feel literal, as though the valley has spread beneath her very street. The church bells no longer ring. The priest's house stands dark, and yet she reads on, not for salvation, but for company. The prayers make her feel as though she's not the last sound left alive in the house. Across the street, the neighbors' curtains have been drawn for 2 days. Once that family had filled the evenings with laughter, a piano, a girl's voice singing hymns too joyfully to be proper. Now only silence hums from those walls. The fog makes all houses equal, turning the fine and the poor into the same grey silhouette. Even grief feels uniform, as if London has become one vast room of mourning. She sets her teacup aside and kneels by the small fire. The coals hiss weakly. Coal is scarce now, and the dealers charge in silver or silence. Her hands tremble as she feeds the last scrap of wood into the grate. The flame sputters, struggling, before flaring weakly against the damp. Its warmth touches the prayer book lying open on the floor. She lowers her head and presses her palm to its pages. They feel warm for a moment, almost alive. Outside, the sound of the cart returns. This time it stops in front of her house. The knock is soft, almost kind. "Any sickness here?" A voice calls. Margaret looks toward the door but does not answer. She closes the book and whispers one final line under her breath. "Deliver us from evil." She rises slowly, smoothing her dress, and walks to the window. The fog beyond is so dense she can see only the faint suggestion of movement, men in dark coats, faces wrapped in cloth, loading something heavy onto the cart. One of them looks up, as if sensing her behind the glass. She steps back, clutching the book to her chest. When night comes, the lavender wilts. The fire dies. The house sinks into its stillness. But in the faint moonlight, her prayer book lies open once more on the table, its pages stirring slightly in the draft, as if someone unseen were still turning them line by line, verse by verse, in a city that has forgotten how to pray. It should have sounded at 6. For years, the shrill cry of the factory whistle had been London's second heartbeat, a piercing signal that split the morning fog and drove thousands from their beds. It called the city to motion, to purpose, to order. But this morning, the air is still. The silence spreads through the streets of Southwark like a revelation. The whistle has fallen quiet. Inside the textile mill, a few of the machines still hum, their belts turning in lazy, uneven loops. The great looms stand half-fed, spools of thread hanging loose, the air thick with dust and lint. A handful of workers remain, ghosts in aprons and caps, their movements mechanical. They do not speak. They pull the levers, tie the threads, watch the wheels spin. The overseer, Mr. March, paces the floor with a cane in one hand and a handkerchief in the other. He coughs into it when he thinks no one is watching. The factory once employed 400 souls. Now fewer than 50 come through the gates. Some stay home, too frightened to breathe the same air as others. Others have simply vanished, taken by the fever or by despair. The owners have posted a notice promising extra pay to those who remain, but money has lost its shine. What good are coins when the shops are shuttered and the market's full of silence? Among the workers is Clara Vale, a weaver of 23, her hair bound in a kerchief the color of old ash. She remembers when the factory roared like thunder, when the floor vibrated beneath her boots, when sweat and laughter filled the air together. Now she moves through the stillness, her hands deft from habit, her thoughts far away. The thread slips once, twice a sign she is tired. She hasn't eaten since yesterday's bread went hard as stone. Mr. March stops beside her loom. "You're late," he says hoarsely, though she knows the whistle never blew. His face looks pale beneath the gaslight, a sheen of sweat on his brow. He grips his cane tighter. "Keep working. We mustn't let the city die." The words sound rehearsed, borrowed from an order he no longer believes in. By mid-morning, the fog has seeped through the factory's high windows, dimming the light. The machines begin to slow. One stops altogether, its belt sagging, the sound of its motor fading like a dying breath. Mr. March limps to restart it, his cough deepening, his body swaying with the effort. "Don't stop," he gasps. "Don't." But the command breaks off. He collapses beside the loom, his cane clattering to the floor. The workers freeze. No one moves for a long moment. Then Clara kneels beside him, pressing a trembling hand to his throat. His pulse is faint, then gone. She closes his eyes with her fingertips and whispers a prayer she can barely remember. The others step back, staring, uncertain whether to help or to flee. The fog has grown so thick it looks like smoke, curling around the looms and rising toward the ceiling. When Clara stands, she pulls. The whistle cord. It lets out one strangled cry, sharp, broken, and brief before dying completely. The sound echoes through the mill and out into the streets, a last farewell to labor, to order, to the illusion of control. Outside, the fog swallows the sound whole, and as the workers file out into the dim morning, their faces turned upward toward the colorless sky, London exhales one long, weary sigh that carries the ghost of that whistle far across the river, where it lingers for a moment before dissolving into the silence of the plague. The garret smells of turpentine and wax. Brushes stand like wilted flowers in cloudy jars, their bristles hardened from neglect. The last of the daylight filters through the grimy skylight, settling in pale streaks across a dozen unfinished canvases, faces without names, eyes without pupils, bodies caught between life and silence. The painter, Edward Lark, stands in the center of it all, palette in hand, as though waiting for one of them to speak. He hadn't started as a painter of the dead. In another life, he'd been known for portraits of the living lords and ladies in silk and lace, captured in soft color and pride. His hands had been steady then, his studio full of laughter and the scent of perfume. But since the fever came, his patrons had fled the city, and his commission letters had stopped arriving. The only knocks on his door now were desperate ones, mothers clutching lockets, husbands carrying scraps of cloth. "Paint her," they would beg, "before she's taken." At first, he refused. Then hunger won. Now he paints to survive, to make memory from decay. His subjects arrive wrapped in sheets, pale as wax, sometimes still warm. He lights a single candle beside them and sets to work before the light fades. He no longer tries to capture their likeness. Instead, he paints what he sees in their stillness, the strange calm, the surrender, the faint suggestion that death is not an ending, but an unveiling. Tonight's subject lies on the table by the window, a young woman with hair the color of copper and a thin scar beneath her chin. She was found in a boarding house near the docks, unnamed, unclaimed. The undertaker had brought her to Edward's door himself. "One of the anonymous," he'd said, dropping a coin on the table. "The hospitals want her likeness recorded for the records, they say." Edward knew better. No one would hang her painting in any hall. He begins with the outlined, soft, deliberate strokes, his hand trembling only when he remembers to breathe. The candlelight trembles too, flickering across her closed eyes. He mixes color after color, though each one seems wrong. Too warm for her skin, too bright for the room. As he paints, the fog outside thickens, pressing against the window pane like a watchful face. The light fades faster than it should. Halfway through, the brush slips. He curses softly and leans closer to steady his hand. That's when he sees it, the faintest twitch of her fingers. He freezes. Another movement follows, the smallest rise of her chest. "No," he whispers. He touches her wrist. It's cold, but not cold enough. The candle guttered once, twice. He steps back, heart hammering. Then, just as quickly, the movement stops. Her hand relaxes. The breath he thought he saw dissolves into stillness. He waits, staring, but nothing more happens. The silence of the garret settles heavy again. He sits, hands shaking, and dips his brush once more. The next strokes come differently, slower, reverent, almost tender. When he paints her eyes this time, he leaves them half open, as if she might still be looking back. By dawn, the painting is finished. He leans it against the wall beside the others, all of them watching him in shades of ash and gold. He wipes his brush clean, pours the last of his turpentine down the sink, and opens the window. The fog rushes in like a tide, swirling around him and his quiet gallery of the dead. Somewhere far below, a bell tolls for morning. Edward listens, his hand still stained with paint, and whispers, "Another commission finished." But in the dim light, it's hard to tell whether he's speaking to the dead woman, to himself, or to the city that has already become his final masterpiece. No one remembers when the first seed was planted there. Some say it began as a kindness, a patch of green for the paupers to tend between shifts at the looms and the laundry vats. Others whisper it grew from a grave, that something took root where a nameless woman had been buried years before. Whatever its beginning, the small garden behind the Bethnal Green workhouse is the only living thing left that dares to grow. In the early mornings, when the fog lies thin and white, Sister Agnes comes out to sweep the path. She wears her wimple tight, her sleeves rolled high, her breath visible in the cold air. She hums as she works, not hymns, but wordless tunes learned from her childhood by the sea. The other sisters say she hums to keep the ghosts away. She thinks she hums to keep herself from hearing them. The garden is small, barely 10 steps long, walled by soot-dark brick. A few stubborn lilacs bloom in the corner, their scent sharp and sweet against the sour air. Rows of herbs grow in crooked lines, sage, mint, and lavender. Their leaves are greyed by the smoke that drifts from the chimneys. In the center stands a single yew tree, its branches heavy, the ground beneath it dark. The paupers say it never loses its leaves because it feeds on what lies below. That morning, the yard is silent except for the scrape of her broom. The workhouse doors are shut, most of the inmates too weak to rise. The fever has found its way inside at last. Sister Agnes had tried to keep it out, vinegar rags at the windows, boiling water in the halls, but the air itself seems poisoned now. Even the candles burn low, their light thick and orange, as if choking. She stops sweeping and kneels beside the lilac bush, her knees sinking into the damp earth. A fine frost glitters on the petals. She runs her fingers through the soil, still warm, faintly pulsing, as though something beneath it is alive. She feels foolish, crosses herself quickly, and begins to prune the wilted stems. Behind her, the workhouse door creaks open. It's one of the boys, Thomas, no older than 12, his eyes too large for his face. He stands barefoot on the step, shivering. "Sister," he says, "they're gone." She straightens. "Who, child?" "All of 'em in the sick ward." His voice is flat. Not one's breathing. She looks toward the building, the windows steamed over, the silence too complete. The garden seems to still itself around her, the branches motionless, the air heavy with the scent of earth and ash. She nods once. "Fetch the cart," she says softly. The boy hesitates. "Sister, will it come for us too?" Agnes rests her hand on his shoulder. "It already has," she whispers. Then she turns back to the lilacs. She plucks a few blossoms, pale as bone, and lays them gently in her apron. "We'll give them these," she says, "something sweet to carry. By afternoon the bodies will be lined beneath the yew. The scent of lilac will mingle with lime and lye. The workhouse will fall silent except for the faint rustle of leaves that never drop, even in winter. And when the night fog returns, curling over the wall like a thief, it will carry the garden's perfume through the streets, the only hint of beauty left in a city that smells of death." They called her the Lady of Blackfriars, though no one knew her name, and few had seen her face. She appeared only after sunset, when the streets were emptied of carriages and prayers, and the fog hung low enough to hide a secret. Some swore she was a nurse, others a mourner gone mad, and still others whispered she was death herself, walking upright through the ruins of the city. What they all agreed upon was the mask, long, pale, and beaked like a raven. It was carved from porcelain, painted faintly with gold at the edges, and shaped after the old plague doctor's design. But unlike theirs, hers was beautiful. The glass eyes gleamed, and beneath the hood of her cloak she wore pearls around her neck. To some, she looked like a saint come to tend the dying. To others, like the last cruelty of a god grown tired of pity. The mask had been made for her by a dressmaker from Mayfair, the same woman who once embroidered gowns for queens. When the fever spread, her commissions turned to shrouds. The lady had come one evening with a roll of silk and a strange request. "Make me something lovely," she'd said, "something that death would recognize as kin." She had paid in silver coins, each one marked with an unfamiliar crest. Now she walks through Blackfriars Lane in silence, the fog parting like a curtain before her. From her satchel she draws small vials of rose oil and vinegar, dabbing them on the masks of the few doctors still brave enough to work. To those who reach for her hand, she offers linen soaked in camphor, or words so gentle they almost sound like forgiveness. She carries no lantern, yet the darkness seems to follow her willingly. At St. Paul's churchyard, she stops before a row of bodies laid beneath tarps. The undertakers watch from a distance, hats in hand, unwilling to step closer. The lady kneels and uncovers one, a girl no older than 15, her hair plaited neatly, her eyes still open to the night. "You dreamed of silk, didn't you?" the lady murmurs. "And music." Her voice is soft but carries, echoing off the walls of the empty cathedral. She closes the girl's eyes, then ties a ribbon of white around her wrist. When she rises, the undertakers cross themselves. "Leave her," one mutters. "She marks them for the angels." The other shakes his head. "No, for the earth." The lady turns to them, her mask reflecting the faint glimmer of a street lamp. "Both," she says simply. Then she disappears into the mist. By morning, the ribbons she left behind have vanished. Some claim they turn to dust when touched by sunlight, others that the lady returns to collect them, carrying them in her satchel like prayers. The children of Blackfriars leave flowers on the stones where she has walked, violets, mostly, and bits of lace. And sometimes, late at night, when the fog thickens and the city holds its breath, a faint glimmer moves through the haze, the curve of porcelain, the shimmer of pearls, and the people whisper to one another, "She's still here." But no one dares to follow her home, for in a city where death wears 1,000 faces, hers is the only one that smiles. The undertaker's shop sits at the end of a narrow alley behind Bishopsgate, its sign swinging faintly in the wind. Merrin and Son, funerary services, dignity for the departed. But there is no sun anymore, and dignity is a luxury no one can afford. Inside, the air smells of wax, sawdust, and the faint sweetness of decay. Coffin lids lean against the walls like waiting doors. The light is yellow, filtered through grime. Mr. Thomas Merrin has been awake for 36 hours. His hands are cracked and raw from lime, his eyes rimmed with red. He moves slowly, methodically, planing a coffin lid by the fire where a kettle hisses softly. He no longer bothers with measurements. He's learned the average size of the dead. The sawdust clings to his sleeves like snow. When the kettle begins to scream, he sets down his tools and pours himself a cup of weak tea, letting the steam fog his glasses. He used to drink in company. His son, Daniel, would sit across from him, feet swinging, asking questions about everything, about the brass handles, about why they used pine instead of oak, about whether people dreamed inside the boxes they built. "They dream of quiet," Thomas used to say. The boy had laughed at that. He hasn't laughed in 6 weeks. Thomas keeps Daniel's teacup on the mantel. It's clean, untouched, a relic. Sometimes he pours 2 cups anyway, setting one across from him out of habit. The tea cools, undrunk, while he talks to the empty chair. 70 today, he says quietly. More coming in from Shoreditch before dusk. He lifts the cup, swallows and winces. The tea tastes of ashes. The bell above the door jingles a sound so small it startles him. A figure stands in the doorway, wrapped in mourning black, a veil hiding her face. "Are you open?" she asks. Her voice trembles. "We never close," Thomas replies, though his voice has gone hoarse from disuse. She steps inside, clutching a small bundle wrapped in a shawl. He knows, before she speaks, what it is. "A child?" he asks gently. She nods, not trusting her voice. He gestures to the table. "Leave them here, miss. I'll see to it." She hesitates, then places the bundle down. A small hand slips free, pale as candle wax. Thomas clears his throat. "Would you like a cup of tea?" She looks at him, startled by the question. Then, slowly, she nods. He pours the last of the kettle into 2 chipped cups and slides one toward her. They sit in silence. The fire pops. She pulls her veil aside just enough for him to see the hollowness in her eyes. "Do you ever get used to it?" she asks. He stares into his cup. "No, you just learn to stop asking why." When she leaves, she forgets her shawl. Thomas folds it carefully and places it beside the child's bundle. He will burn both before dawn, a mercy against contagion, though he tells himself it's an act of reverence. He pours himself one final cup, raising it toward the empty chair across the table. "To the quiet," he murmurs. The candle flickers. Outside, the cartwheels rumble closer, and the bell above the door jingles again. But Thomas does not rise this time. His hand rests lightly on the cup, steam curling between his fingers. The tea has gone cold, but in the stillness of the undertaker's shop, it smells faintly, impossibly of lavender and sleep. In the upper room of the Central Telegraph Office, the air hums with static and sorrow. The wires never sleep anymore. They tremble day and night, whispering grief from one end of England to the other. Beneath the clicking of the keys, there is an undertone, a restless pulse, like the faint heartbeat of the city itself, stretched thin through copper and distance. Arthur Bell sits hunched over his desk, sleeves rolled, eyes rimmed red. He has not gone home in 3 days. The building smells of oil and ozone, the air dry from the constant charge. His fingers move mechanically, transcribing each incoming message onto paper that curls from the damp. Mother gone, stop. Burial postponed, stop. Send prayers, stop. Another message follows before he finishes the first. Hospital close, stop. No space, stop. God help us, stop. He writes, folds, and passes the slips down the line. No one reads them aloud anymore. Even the operators have learned to treat words like contagion. The rhythm of the telegraph is their only comfort. A cold, mechanical heartbeat that promises they are still part of a living world, however broken. On the far side of the room, Miss Lydia Crane sits before her instrument, her hair pinned neatly despite the heat. She is the only one who still hums as she works, faint melodies barely audible over the tap and click. When she pauses to rest her wrist, she glances across the room toward Arthur. "You should sleep," she says softly. He shakes his head. "The wires don't." A smile ghosts across her lips. "Then we'll keep them company." The next message arrives with a sharper click. An urgent line from Bristol. "Plague moving south. Stop trains. Halted. Stop request confirmation. London stop." Arthur hesitates before responding. His superior has warned him not to send truth too quickly. Panic spreads faster than illness. But he has lost too much already to lie. He taps back carefully, his fingers trembling. "Confirmed. Stop London. Unwell. Stop. Take caution. Stop. Pray for clear skies. Stop." The reply takes almost a full minute to come. "Understood. Stop. God keep you. Stop." He leans back, exhaling, the sound lost amid the tapping. The candles on each desk burn low, their wax spilling across ledgers filled with names and dates. At midnight, the line from Scotland goes dead, the signal fading into silence, the coil still glowing faintly before cooling. No one speaks. It is not the first line lost, and it will not be the last. By morning, the fog presses against the office windows, dimming the weak light. Lydia rises to boil water on the small stove, her motions quiet and precise. "Tea?" she asks, as though this is an ordinary day. Arthur nods. When she brings the cup, her fingers brush his. They are cold, too cold. He looks up, and for the first time notices the blue under her skin, the faint tremor in her breath. She returns to her seat without a word. The key before her clicks once more, slow, uneven. "I am well. Stop. Please tell them." "Stop." Then the signal falters, repeating the last word again and again until it fades entirely. Arthur sits staring at the silent key. He does not send a reply. Instead, he tears a blank sheet from his ledger and writes, "Gone, silent, stop." He pins it to the wall among 100 others, identical in tone and brevity. When the next message arrives, he copies it with shaking hands. "Is there hope? Stop. Just that. Nothing else." He hesitates, then taps his response. "Yes, stop, but not yet stop." Outside, the telegraph poles vanish into the fog, their wires stretched taut like the veins of a dying giant. They still hum faintly, carrying their messages through the mist, endless clicks of love, loss, and prayer, the last heartbeat of a city that has forgotten how to speak, but refuses to stop sending signals into the silence. At Street Brides on Fleet Street, the choir once lifted heaven itself. On Sunday mornings, their voices soared through the nave like light through stained glass, turning dust into gold and prayer into music. But that was before the smoke thickened, before the bells fell silent, before the air in the church grew too heavy to sing. Now the pews are draped in sheets, the organ covered in tarps, and the songbooks lie closed, each page damp and curling from neglect. The last time they sang, it was not a hymn of praise but a dirge. It had been early autumn then, the day the first priest collapsed at the altar. The choir had continued singing, their voices trembling, as the acolytes carried him away. The next week, the altos were gone, then the sopranos, then the choirmaster himself, who left a note pinned to the music stand that read simply, "Forgive us. The lungs cannot bear it." Only one voice remains now, a boy's, thin but pure as glass. His name is Thomas Gray, 12 years old, an orphan taken in by the church before the fever began. He sleeps in the vestry, beneath the heavy robes of the dead clergy. Each dawn, he rises and lights a single candle near the pulpit. Then he climbs the narrow steps to the organ loft, where the air tastes of dust and oil, and he sings, not for an audience, not for coin, but because silence frightens him more than death. His favorite hymn is "Abide with Me." He knows every note, though his voice cracks when he reaches the words, "Fast falls the eventide." The sound echoes through the empty church, soft and mournful, bouncing off marble pillars and into the rafters where pigeons nest. Sometimes he imagines the other voices returning, the altos behind him, the deep hum of the basses below, the sopranos spilling light down the aisle. He closes his eyes, and for a heartbeat, he can hear them again, faint but real. That morning, as he sings, the fog presses against the stained glass until the colored light fades to gray. The air grows colder. He coughs between verses but keeps going. The candle flickers violently in the draught. Somewhere outside, the carts roll past, their wheels muffled by the mist. Then, from below, a new sound: footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, echoing on the stone floor. He falters mid-note and listens. "Father?" he calls. The voice that answers is not one he knows. "Keep singing," it says, a whisper that seems to come from every corner of the church at once. Thomas grips the railing, his pulse racing. The footsteps fade. The fog seeps through the cracks in the stained glass, coiling like breath. He begins again, voice shaking but steadying with each word. "When other helpers fail and comforts flee," the candle gutters. The air grows so thick it feels like water. His last note hangs in the air, trembling, then dissolves. When the sexton enters at dawn, the loft is empty. The candle is burnt to the wick. The church doors stand open, and outside, the fog moves, gently down Fleet Street, carrying with it a faint echo of music, a single, pure voice rising and falling, unaccompanied, untethered, and free. It fades somewhere over the river, as though the city itself has taken up the hymn and is singing it into the endless mist. Cold Harbour Gaol squats on the edge of Southwark like a bruise, its walls black with soot, its windows barred and narrow as scars. Before the sickness came, the place seethed with noise, the clank of irons, the shouts of guards, the constant rumble of men cursing their luck. Now it sits in a hush so deep it hums, a silence broken only by the slow drip of water through the roof and the scratch of rats beneath the floorboards. Warden Elias Kersey makes his rounds with a lantern and a handkerchief tied over his mouth. The flame quivers each time he passes a cell. There were once 100 men in this corridor. He counts fewer than 30 now. The rest lie in the yard, waiting for carts that come less and less often. The air smells of iron, mildew, and the faint, sour breath of dying men. He stops at cell 14. The prisoner inside, John Tallow, thief, 2 months into a 12-year sentence, sits upright on his cot, arms wrapped around his knees. His lips move constantly, whispering prayers or curses. Elias can't tell which. "Water," the man croaks. The warden pours a few drops from his flask into a tin cup and slides it through the bars. The prisoner drinks, then wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. "They stopped bringing bread," he mutters. "The bakers are dead," Elias answers flatly. He doesn't mention that half his own guards are gone too. "Keep your strength," Tallow lets out a dry laugh. "For what, sir? There's no one left to hang me." Elias moves on. Each step echoes in the damp corridor. He used to believe the prison kept order in a chaotic world, that walls and rules could keep the darkness at bay. But now, the walls themselves feel sick. The lime has sweated from the mortar. The locks corrode. The prisoners don't try to escape anymore. Where would they go? The city beyond the gate is another cell, larger, noisier, and full of ghosts. In the guardroom, a single candle burns beside a ledger filled with names, already crossed out. The ink runs in places where the roof leaks. Elias sits heavily at the desk, rubbing his temples. On the shelf behind him, a Bible gathers dust. He hasn't opened it in weeks. A sound interrupts his thoughts, a low, steady rhythm from the upper floor. He rises and follows it, boots creaking on the wooden steps. It's singing, faint, tuneless, but unmistakably human. When he reaches the corridor above, he realizes it's coming from one of the cells near the infirmary. He peers through the bars. Inside, 3 prisoners sit in a circle, their hands clasped, humming an old hymn. The tune wavers, uncertain, but it fills the corridor like breath. Elias watches, unmoving. He wants to tell them to stop, to save their strength, to be quiet, but the sound is fragile and beautiful, a thing too rare to break. When dawn filters weakly through the skylight, he finds them still seated, their heads bowed, their song ended. All 3 are dead. He stands for a long time before unlocking the door. The cell is warm, the air faintly sweet. By afternoon, Elias unlocks every cell in the corridor. The doors creak open one by one, and the remaining prisoners step into the hall, blinking at the light. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. The city outside will hold them now, or kill them, it makes no difference. That night, as he sits alone in the empty prison, Elias hears it again, the same melody, soft and low, winding through the walls. It isn't coming from the cells this time. It's the building itself, groaning its own requiem, one long note that vibrates through the stone until it fades into silence. When the guards return 3 days later, they find the gates open, the cells unlocked, and the warden's lantern still burning on his desk, its flame steady, patient, and waiting. In the vast iron belly of Euston Station, the world has come to a stop. The great locomotives, once roaring beasts of fire and steel, now sit frozen on their tracks, their funnels blackened, their wheels stiff with rust. The echo of travel, the hiss of brakes, the clatter of trunks, the whistle that split the morning fog has been replaced by stillness. The steam that once carried London's pulse into the countryside no longer rises. It hangs low, like breath caught in a dying throat. Arthur Giddings, the station engineer, walks the length of the platform with a lantern in hand. Its glow moves like an ember through the haze, barely enough to cut the dimness. He has been coming here every day, though no trains arrive and no passengers wait. It is not duty that brings him, but habit, the same stubborn rhythm that drives the clock to tick long after its maker is gone. He stops by engine 47, the Albion, his favourite of the fleet. Its brass nameplate is dulled by soot, the coal, tender, half empty. He runs a gloved hand across the metal, feeling the cold seep through. "You were a proud one," he murmurs. "Could pull 100 souls north through snow without a cough." The silence that answers feels almost alive, as though the machine itself remembers. The last train to leave Euston had gone 3 weeks ago, a desperate evacuation north to escape the fever's spread. Men, women, children packed like freight, faces pressed to the windows, breath fogging the glass. Arthur had waved them off, promising more departures soon. None ever came back. Within days, the station fell ill, like the rest of the city. The porters were the first to go, then the clerks, then the firemen who tended the engines. The air turned thick, tasting of oil and death. Now only Arthur remains. He keeps the lamps lit and the clocks wound, though time itself feels meaningless. Each morning he tries to light the boilers, pouring in coal and striking matches until his fingers burn. The fires never catch. The steam refuses to rise. It's as though the engines know what waits beyond the city, nothing worth running toward. This evening he hears footsteps echoing down the concourse. He grips his lantern tighter. From the fog, a figure emerges, a woman in a heavy coat, carrying a small case. Her face is hidden by a veil, her voice soft but clear. "Is there a train tonight?" she asks. The question feels like a memory, something spoken from another lifetime. Arthur opens his mouth, but the truth sticks in his throat. He gestures toward the silent engines. "No steam," he says finally. "She won't wake." The woman nods, then sets her case on the platform. "Then I'll wait," she murmurs, sitting on a bench beneath the flickering lamp. Her stillness unsettles him. He turns to check the gauges, and when he looks back, she is gone. Only the case remains. Curious, he kneels and opens it. Inside, wrapped in linen, lies a child's toy, a small wooden train, perfectly carved, its chimney painted gold. Beside it, a note in careful handwriting, for when the steam returns. Arthur closes the lid and sits beside it until dawn. When the first light creeps through the glass ceiling, the fog has thickened again. It moves through the station like breath, curling around the silent engines, filling the air with the faintest sound, not a whistle, but the ghost of one, distant and longing, and for a heartbeat, He imagines the pistons stirring, the pressure rising, the rails humming once more. But when he opens his eyes, the sound is gone. The platform is empty. Only the cold remains, heavy and final, the weight of a city whose engines, like its heart, have forgotten how to move. By the time the great hospitals closed their doors, she was one of the few left who refused to leave. Nurse Evelyn Harrow had worked at Street Thomas's since she was 16, first as a washer of linens, then as an apprentice, and finally as a ward nurse, with the quiet steadiness of someone who had seen too much and learned to speak little of it. When the other nurses fled or fell ill, she simply stayed. Someone must keep the light on, she'd said, and no one had the heart to argue. The building now stands half empty, its long corridors echoing with wind instead of footsteps. The gas lamps flicker weakly against the gloom, and the wards smell of carbolic, candle smoke, and rot. Evelyn moves through them with a small oil lantern, her shoes making soft clicks against the tiles. She carries a notebook. Though she no longer writes in it, there are no names left to record, only faces that fade before dawn. In Ward C, there are 6 patients still alive. A man with bandaged lungs, a mother who hums lullabies to a child already gone, 2 soldiers from the docks, their hands still stained with coal. She tends to them one by one, washing faces, cooling fevered brows, whispering comfort in a voice that trembles only when she's alone. Sometimes she reads to them from the Psalms, though her voice grows faint before the end of each verse. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures," she murmurs, smoothing the sheet over another still chest. Outside, the fog presses against the windows, turning the light into a dim, jaundiced glow. The river groans beyond the wall, carrying the smell of the dead downstream. Evelyn remembers the city before it changed, the laughter of carriages on Westminster Bridge, the smell of coffee from the stalls, the sound of bells ringing across the water. The memory feels like someone else's dream now. That night, she hears footsteps in the hall, firm, rhythmic, deliberate. She sets down her lantern and calls out, "Doctor." No answer. The footsteps stop just outside the ward door. She opens it and finds no one there, only the fog drifting in, curling around her ankles. She shuts it quickly, heart pounding. The air has grown colder. In the morning, the soldiers are gone. Their beds are empty, sheets folded neatly at the foot, as if someone had come and carried them away without sound. She searches the corridor but finds only footprints in the dust, not boots, but bare feet, leading toward the chapel. Evelyn follows them. The chapel doors stand open. Candles burn low along the altar, though she hasn't lit them in days. She kneels, her knees aching, her breath trembling. "If it's mercy," she whispers, "then let it be swift." The silence answers, vast and kind. When the undertakers come 3 days later, they find her seated by the last occupied bed, her head resting gently on her folded hands. The lantern beside her still burns. On the table lies her notebook, open to a single sentence, written in an unsteady hand. They are not alone. The undertakers bow their heads before covering her with the sheet. As they leave, the lantern's flame flickers once and steadies again, a small, steadfast light burning in the silence, refusing to die, the last heartbeat of Street Thomas's hospital. The streets of Whitechapel are wet with early frost, though the fog has made the morning feel like evening. Icicles hang from the eaves of shuttered shops, and the river breathes a thick mist that curls between buildings like living smoke. Among the alleys, small children huddle together for warmth, their faces pale beneath threadbare caps. One of them is Annabel, the butcher's daughter, barely 12, with hair the color of soot and eyes too wide for her face. She had been sent to fetch meat for the family before the sickness took her father. Now, the butcher's shop is empty, the cleaver still hung above the counter, its blade dulled by disuse. Annabel steps over scraps of fat frozen to the floor, her boots slippery on ice and blood. She carries a small basket, hoping to find something left in the market. A bit of bread, a turnip, anything. The streets are nearly deserted, and every sound is magnified. The drip of water from a gutter, the scraping of a cart in the distance, the faint cough of someone too sick to stay indoors. The alley narrows as she passes the abandoned tannery. The smell hits her first: copper, decay, and something sour beneath it all. She pauses, pressing the basket to her chest. A shadow moves at the corner of her vision. She spins. Nothing. Only the fog, thick and slow, drifting along the cobblestones. Her pulse races. Her father's voice would have laughed at her fears. But he is gone. Her mother has not been seen in 3 days. She is alone. She hurries on, skirting a body wrapped in a sheet that a passing cart has left in the road. Even at a distance, she can see the outline of a hand, the slight rise of a chest that will never move again. Annabel turns her eyes away and bites her lip. She can feel the fog pressing against her face, heavy, sour, smelling of coal and death. Her basket grows heavier with each step, though it contains nothing more than scraps she scavenged from doorsteps and gutters. At the far end of the alley, a small bakery stands, the shutters hanging loose, the sign swinging in the fog. Bread for sale. Annabel raps on the door, hoping for a living hand to pass her something. Silence. She pounds again, louder this time. A single figure appears at the window, masked and pale. "No bread," the man whispers. "Go home before the fog finds you." Home. The word feels strange. The house is silent, empty. No mother to scold her for lingering, no father to hand her coins for meat. She steps inside, the door creaking like a sigh. The hearth is cold. The knives on the wall gleam faintly in the grey light. Annabel sits on the floor, pressing her knees to her chest, her basket empty, her stomach aching. Outside, the fog swirls. She can hear the distant wheels of a cart, the slow scrape of the undertaker's passage, the faint cough of someone beyond a shuttered door. She closes her eyes and imagines her father standing behind the counter, smiling as though nothing has changed. But the alley waits, silent and patient, ready to claim her if she rises again. By nightfall, the house is quiet. Annabel curls beneath a threadbare blanket, the basket by her side. The fog presses against the windows, heavy and warm, whispering through the cracks. Somewhere, a bell tolls, faint and distant, marking another day in which the city remembers the living and records, without mercy, those it has already claimed. In the drawing rooms of Belgravia, the gaslights burn low, flickering across gilt mirrors and polished tables. Lord Percival Ashcombe adjusts the mask that has become as essential as his gloves, its fine leather curved to fit the face, and its small vents scented with camphor and lavender. He had worn it first as a precaution, a shield against the fever that crawled through London like a living thing. Now, weeks later, it has become a symbol, a barrier between himself and the city outside, a talisman against the air that has claimed so many. The servants whisper behind closed doors, keeping their distance. Even the butler, a man named Hawkins, now moves with careful precision, placing tea and toast before his master without eye contact. The room smells faintly of burned coal, lemon, and something else, a metallic, coppery tang that clings to the mask like memory. Lord Ashcombe sips from a porcelain cup, careful not to breathe too deeply, watching the fog curl past the windows, like smoke from an unseen fire. The city beyond his walls has changed. Streets once filled with carriages, footmen, and children now lie empty, save for the occasional cart or the distant sound of a bell. People no longer gather in markets. They stay inside, eyes pressed to glass, listening for the telltale creak of wheels or the cough that signals the illness is near. News travels slowly, carried by whispers and letters that never arrive. Ashcombe reads what he can, but the words are always tinged with panic. Sometimes lies, sometimes truth too dreadful to bear. He adjusts the mask again, running a gloved hand over the soft leather. It is beautiful, finely made by a craftsman in Mayfair, with delicate stitching and tiny gold embellishments. But no beauty can protect him from what waits outside. His chest rises and falls with careful rhythm. Every inhalation is measured. Even within these walls, the air feels heavy, tainted. He wonders if the scent of camphor can truly keep the fever from finding him, or if it is only a comfort, a ritual, a promise to himself that he will not be claimed like so many others. At dusk, the fog presses harder, the gaslight bends in its depths, and Ashcombe imagines shapes moving within it, shadows with the wrong angles, hands that reach too long, faces pressed against the mist. He walks slowly to the window, looking down on the street below. He can see nothing but the thick white curl of fog and the faint glimmer of a lantern. Somewhere far away, a cart moves, slow and deliberate. He does not move closer, he does not call out. There is nothing to be done for those already caught. By nightfall, he retreats to the library, the mask still in place. He pours himself more tea, though it tastes bitter now, and opens a ledger of names, servants, neighbors, acquaintances marking those who have vanished, those who are ill, those who remain. The act brings no comfort. Each name is a reminder of fragility, a record of mortality. He sits alone, candlelight flickering across his mask. Outside, the fog shifts against the windows, curling as though alive. The city breathes quietly, waiting, and Lord Ashcombe, behind his fine leather mask, waits with it, holding himself upright in a house that remembers the living but already mourns the dead. The shop on Fleet Street has been still for days. No ticking, no chimes, no delicate heartbeat of gears meshing beneath polished wood. The windows are streaked with grime, the panes fogged from the cold, damp air. Samuel Pritchard, clockmaker and watchmaker, stands in the center of the room, a brass magnifier perched on his nose, staring at a wall of timepieces that have all fallen silent. He adjusts his spectacles again, though he knows it will not help. The mainsprings are frozen, the pendulums hang heavy, unmoving. Samuel used to take pride in the chorus of his clocks, the soft tick of the mantel clocks in the front room, the measured swing of the regulators, the gentle chime of the wall clocks. It had all been music to his ears, a harmony he conducted with careful hands. Now, the silence has grown so deep it presses against him, a weight that seems to push into his chest, pressing every breath shallow. He picks up a pocket watch from the counter, its case cool beneath his fingertips. The hands are stopped at 11 minutes past 3. He winds it, over and over, until his fingers ache. But the mechanism refuses to move. Outside, the fog presses against the glass like a tide, carrying with it the distant, muffled rumble of carts, the coughing of unseen bodies, the faint wail of a bell somewhere beyond. Time has no meaning now, and neither does the measure of it. The door creaks, and Samuel looks up. No one stands there. He exhales slowly, turning back to the wall of clocks. The larger regulators have dust thick in their gears. He sweeps it away, careful, methodical, though he knows it will make no difference. A small voice in the corner of his mind whispers that these clocks, these measures of seconds and minutes, are useless in a city where life has no rhythm. He sits at his workbench and opens a drawer filled with tiny tools, tweezers, pinions, screwdrivers, a single magnifying lens. He studies the escapement of a long-case clock, the heart of its mechanism, and for a moment imagines it still beating. He thinks of the houses across the street, their shutters drawn, the families huddled in silence, waiting for a minute to pass or a breath to come. He thinks of the children who will never hear the chimes, of the mothers who pray for the seconds to slow, for life to stretch one moment longer. Samuel places the tiny wheel back into its place and steps away from the bench. He listens. The silence is absolute, but it is not empty. Somewhere deep in the fog, the city breathes, a slow, measured inhalation that shakes the cobblestones beneath his feet. The carts continue to move, carrying the dead, the sick, the forgotten, each passing like a ghost through the streets. By nightfall, he extinguishes the lamp. The clocks, frozen and still, stand like sentinels in the dim light. Samuel steps outside into the thick mist. He hears the faintest rhythm, not of brass or spring, but of life struggling against the weight of the city. He breathes it in cautiously, counting each second as it passes, though he knows the clocks will not keep it. The fog swirls, curling into the empty shop and beyond, and in the silence of Fleet Street, Samuel Pritchard walks past his silent clocks, a man marking time in a city where time itself has forgotten how to move. The chapel stands at the end of a narrow lane, its spire barely visible through the dense fog that curls like smoke along the cobblestones. The wooden doors are swollen with damp, the iron hinges stiff and rusted, but they open without resistance when Father Thomas pushes. Inside, the air is thick and heavy, smelling of candle wax, rotting flowers, and the faint metallic tang of blood. The pews are empty, save for a few scattered hymnals, their pages curling and yellowed from neglect. The altar is bare except for a single candle, burning low, its flame shivering as if afraid. Father Thomas kneels before it, hands pressed together, murmuring the evening prayers he has repeated every night since the sickness began. Each word trembles in the cold silence of the chapel. Outside, the fog presses against the stained glass, muting the colors into dull, ghostly shades. Somewhere far beyond, a bell tolls once hollow and faint, then is swallowed by the mist. The city is quiet, too quiet. From the shadows the door creaks. A figure slips in small, pale, swaddled in a tattered cloak. The child does not speak, only kneels beside the priest, eyes wide and shining. Father Thomas lays a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. He can feel the tremor beneath the thin layers of cloth. "You are safe here," he whispers, though neither believes it. The fog outside seems alive, as if it listens. He moves through the chapel, lighting a few more candles from the single flame, setting them along the altar and the window sills. The small pool of light barely penetrates the darkness, but it is enough to reveal the stillness of the chapel, the dust motes floating like tiny spirits, the shadows curling along the walls, and the faint traces of smoke from past prayers that linger in the rafters. Father Thomas opens the Bible, its cover cracked, the leather soft with years of handling. He reads aloud in a voice that wavers but refuses to break, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The words echo in the empty building, swallowed and returned by the thick air. The boy listens, eyes fixed on the flickering flames, but makes no sound. A sudden draught slips under the door, carrying with it the scent of earth and rot, the smell of the streets where the sick and dead have left their mark. Father Thomas glances up. The candles flicker violently. He moves to close the door, but it swings shut on its own, the latch clattering against the wood. Outside, the fog seems to pulse, pressing against the walls as if aware of each heartbeat within. The boy whispers something only a breath, a single word. Father Thomas leans closer. "What is it?" he asks. "Pray," the child murmurs. "For them." Father Thomas nods and resumes reading, the sound of his voice now joined by the faint murmur of the boy repeating the prayers after him. For a moment, they are a chorus, fragile but persistent, filling the chapel with the echo of life. When midnight comes, the paling wind rises outside, rattling the windows and sweeping in thin tendrils of fog. The candle flames bend and shiver, then flicker low. Father Thomas closes the Bible, pressing a hand to the boy's shoulder. The city sleeps beyond the chapel walls, but here, in the small pool of light and shadow, prayer and vigilance hold, however briefly, against the dark. And somewhere in the fog, a faint echo of footsteps moves past the chapel, pausing at the door, listening, then fading into the silence of London's endless night. Beneath the streets of London, the tunnels of old Roman sewers and forgotten cellars run like veins through the earth. They smell of damp stone, of stagnant water, of centuries of refuse, and now, with the plague pressing above, of death itself. In these corridors, the city seems to breathe in a different rhythm, slow, thick, and patient, as though the heartbeat of the living has given way to something older, something buried. Tommy Callow, a ragged boy of 12, moves carefully along the narrow passage under Whitechapel. His lantern swings from his hand, casting long shadows across the rough brick walls. The smell is strong, sour, metallic, heavy. Every drip from the ceilings, every faint scuttle of rats, makes him jump. He has been living here for a week, ever since his parents were taken by the fever, leaving him to survive on scraps found in the gutters and crevices above. The tunnels, he has learned, are safer than the streets. Fewer carts, fewer wandering bodies, fewer eyes to mark him as another lost soul. He pauses at an intersection, listening. The muffled sound of footsteps comes from somewhere above, echoing down the narrow shafts. He knows what it is, another child perhaps, or worse, an adult scavenging the dead. He presses himself against the wall, lantern tilted to throw a sliver of light onto the floor, illuminating only the rough stone beneath his feet. Shadows move as though alive, slinking along the edges of the faint glow. Ahead, a small stream runs through a channel in the stone. The water is black with decay, carrying fragments of wood, paper, and something that floats too easily to be identified. Tommy leans close, scooping a cupful to drink. The taste is bitter and metallic, but better than nothing. As he drinks, he imagines the streets above, the carts, the bells, the fog, the endless grey mist pressing down on houses that are now tombs. Here, at least, the weight of the living world is distant. In the deeper tunnels, brick arches are low and damp. Tommy comes upon a group huddled together. They are children like him, scavengers who have claimed a hidden chamber as home. A fire burns faintly in a barrel, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. They exchange whispered greetings, offering him a small piece of bread. There is laughter, a brittle, tremulous sound, and for a moment, the darkness feels less oppressive. But the city above does not rest, and the silence in the tunnels is fragile. The faint echo of a cart rolling over cobblestones above makes Tommy flinch. Somewhere in the distance, a cough rises, followed by another. The fog has penetrated even here, seeping down through drains, carrying with it the scent of soot and sickness. He pulls his shawl tighter around his shoulders, hiding his face, listening to the rhythm of the water and the breath of the tunnels, trying to count each heartbeat as a measure of life. By dawn, the city above will awaken again, grey and silent, filled with the fear, distant rolling of wheels and muffled cries. Tommy will remain in the shadows below, the hidden city of stone and water keeping him alive, teaching him its slow, patient pulse. Here, beneath the streets, life and death intertwine in ways no sunlight can reveal, and the boy learns, one careful step at a time, to move between them, unseen, unheard, and unclaimed. The morning rises like a pale breath over London, but it brings no song. The sky is a flat, unbroken grey, and the fog lies heavy over the city, curling through alleys and streets with a silence that feels unnatural. From the rooftops, no sparrows lift their wings, no pigeons coo or flap. The air itself seems still, suffocated, as if the sky has forgotten how to breathe. On the roof of a narrow tenement in Whitechapel, Abigail Marks leans against the chimney, her hair damp with frost and soot. She has watched the city for weeks, noting the slow decay of movement, the way even the wind hesitates before it slides between buildings. Usually, the morning is alive with sound, the chatter of vendors, the laughter of children, the creak of carts rolling over cobblestones. Now only faint coughing drifts from below, and the distant toll of a church bell, slow, hollow, and uneven, marks the hour. Abigail shivers, pulling her shawl tighter. Her family is gone, her father and 2 brothers, taken in quick succession by the fever, leaving her with nothing but a small chest of clothes and the memories of a life that feels impossibly distant. She listens to the silence and imagines it stretched across the city, over rooftops, into the houses where families huddle beneath blankets, counting breaths and prayers. On the streets, the mist moves with purpose. It seeps under doors, through broken window panes, around shuttered shops. Horses stumble, their hooves slick with ice and mud, and carts move silently, drawn by men who no longer speak. Abigail knows the route of each one by heart. She watches as a cart pauses at a house near the corner of Hanbury Street, then moves on. She does not flinch. though her stomach tightens. The city is learning her rhythms, teaching her fear, engraving the lessons into her chest. She descends to the street when the fog grows lighter, careful to step softly. The pavements are empty except for a single cat, thin and mottled, winding its way along the walls. Abigail keeps her distance. She has learned that nothing moves without reason in this city anymore. The air is thick with smell, coal, rot, ash, and something metallic. Every inhalation makes her lungs ache, but she forces herself onward, her eyes scanning each doorway and alley. In the square near the river, the benches are empty. No pigeons, no dogs, no children. Only the fog rolls over the stones, as if it is testing the silence, marking it, claiming it. Abigail pauses, listening. Somewhere in the distance, a faint scrape of wheels against stone, the cart again, carrying bodies like packages, moving with the city's slow, deliberate heartbeat. She kneels on the cold pavement and touches the stone, cold and damp beneath her fingers. For a moment, she closes her eyes and listens to the absence of birds, the absence of voices, the absence of mourning. The city exhales, long and heavy, and Abigail understands that she is alone. Not the last, perhaps, but one of the price. Few left who remembers what it sounded like to wake and hear life instead of its echo. By evening, the fog thickens again. Abigail returns to her roof, the world muted, flattened, silent. No birds return, no songs rise. Only the city itself, breathing slowly, endlessly, a morning without birds, carrying the weight of every lost voice in its grey, unbroken air. The messenger arrives just before dawn, crossing the frozen cobbles of Whitehall with the urgency of one who knows the city is already bleeding. His cloak is threadbare, the edges soaked with dew and soot. In his gloved hands, he carries a small sealed packet parchment folded neatly, tied with crimson ribbon. The courier's breath comes in short, sharp bursts, steaming in the cold morning air. Even the fog seems to pause as he approaches the palace gates, curling against the stone like a living thing. Inside, the guards stand at their posts, their faces pale beneath scarves and masks. Some of them cough, others stare at the messenger with hollow eyes. He lifts the seal, shows the royal crest, and murmurs the words that grant him passage. The gates open with a groan of iron, revealing the silent courtyard. Snow has begun to fall lightly, though it is not truly snow, just the ash and soot from chimneys, drifting in soft grey flakes that settle on the flagstones. He makes his way to the Queen's private chambers, each step echoing in the empty halls. Portraits of past monarchs watch him from the walls, their eyes frozen in painted horror, unmoving witnesses to a city unraveling. The Queen, seated by the window, swaddled in velvet and fur, turns her gaze toward him. She has not smiled in weeks. Her hands clutch a cup of spiced wine as if it were armor against the news she fears will arrive. He bows, extending the packet. "Your Majesty," he says. "It is from the Lord Mayor. He writes of the fever's spread. The city cannot contain it." The Queen breaks the seal with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the words. Reports of deaths, entire families vanished overnight, markets closed, carts carrying bodies to the river. The letter is long, meticulous, yet the handwriting shakes with exhaustion and fear. She reads slowly, letting each line sink, the air thickening around her as though the fog itself has followed the courier inside. "They will need guidance," she whispers. Her voice is low, almost lost against the heavy curtains. "We cannot rely on the lords and the sheriffs. Too many have fallen." The messenger shifts, glancing nervously toward the window where the fog presses in, carrying with it the faintest echo of carts and distant bells. "Orders, Your Majesty?" he asks. She looks at him, her eyes sharp now, the sharpness of someone forced to act when everything around her has gone still. "Send more aid, food, water, protect the hospitals that remain, and write to the churches, instruct the clergy to tend the sick, not just pray for the dead." He nods, bowing deeply, though his face betrays his disbelief. "It will be done." The Queen watches him leave, the fog swallowing the corridor as the gates close behind him. She stands, placing the letter on the desk beside her, and turns toward the window. The city spreads beneath her, quiet and trembling, streets and alleys blurred by the fog. Somewhere along the Thames, a bell tolls once, swallowed immediately by the murk. A cart moves silently through the mist, its cargo invisible but present. The Queen leans against the sill, pressing a gloved hand to the glass. She tastes ash and soot on her lips, the air thick and sour, and she thinks of the messenger, how a single man must carry hope through a city that has nearly forgotten what hope feels like. The fog presses closer, curling around the palace walls, and she knows that the orders she sends may arrive too late, that even her will is fragile against the weight of death that has already claimed so much. She turns back to the chamber. The letter lies open, red ribbon curling like a river of blood, and the city beyond waits, silent and patient, for what is to come. In a dimly lit room above a shuttered apothecary on Fleet Street, the Lord Mayor's clerk, Edmund Lacey, spreads a large sheet of parchment across a splintered oak table. The paper is yellowed and brittle, edges curling with damp. Ink stains from previous pages darken the corners, mingling with the faint scent of vinegar and smoke. On the table lies a city reduced to lines and dots. A hand-drawn map of London, every parish marked with tiny crosses, every street traced in meticulous detail. It is a record of the fever, of the houses that have been lost and those yet to succumb. Edmund leans over the map, quill in hand, dipping it into a pot of ink that smells faintly metallic. He traces the path of the disease as if it were a river, flowing through the streets and alleys, spreading inexorably. Whitechapel, Spitalfields, Bethnal Green, each marked with a red cross, dark and deliberate. The squares representing hospitals are ringed, notes scribbled beside them, overflowing, no room, send aid. The fog presses against the window, thick and heavy, as if trying to smear the ink and erase the record. He pauses to light a candle, its flickering flame throwing shadows across the parchment. He draws another cross near the river, where the undertakers have begun stacking the bodies in shallow pits. The city beneath it seems alive, breathing, moving, resisting even in its collapse. The quill hovers over another street, and Edmund hesitates. The numbers are no longer just numbers. They are faces, names whispered in the alleyways, lives extinguished before morning. Outside, the streets are silent except for the occasional creak of a cart or the distant cough of someone too weak to stay indoors. The fog rolls over rooftops and into doorways, carrying with it the scent of coal, rot, and death. Edmund leans closer, pressing the side of his face to the parchment as if he might absorb the pattern of infection by touch. He traces the river's path again, the great artery of the city, black and unyielding, and marks the crossings where the fever has leaped from neighborhood to neighborhood. His hand shakes as he writes the names of the wards, the hospitals, the streets now sealed. He adds small notations. Bodies moved at midnight, infants taken first, prayers for the living cease to be heard. Every mark feels heavy, almost too heavy to bear. The map is not a tool anymore. It is a confession, a record of a city unraveling in silence. By afternoon, a knock comes at the door. Edmund jumps, then freezes, hand on the quill. A messenger slips inside, carrying a report from the western boroughs. New infections, new deaths. A hospital collapsed under the weight of bodies. He leaves as quietly as he came. Edmund watches the candle gutter. The ink on the map has begun to blur slightly with moisture from the fog pressing through the window cracks. He leans back, exhausted, staring at the map as if it might speak back. Every cross, every line, is a story too. Many stories for one man to hold. And still, the city breathes beneath him, waiting, patient and unyielding. The map of infection is complete, yet incomplete, for the fever does not pause for ink, for candlelight, or for the clerk who records its progress. It moves, relentless, through streets and hearts alike, and Edmund can only watch as the city bends beneath its weight, silent and grey, waiting for what comes next. The Thames lies dark and heavy, stretching like a black ribbon through the heart of London. The fog presses low across its surface, curling in slow tendrils that lick the banks, threading through the arches of the bridges and wrapping the warehouses in a cold, wet shroud. The water is thick with refuse, coal dust, and the remnants of a city dying, half-buried crates, splintered barrels, and sometimes something heavier, something that has sunk beneath the surface and will never rise. From the embankment, an old ferryman leans against his oar, breath forming clouds in the chill air. His eyes are red-rimmed and tired. For weeks, he has been ferrying the sick and the dead across the river, moving silently between wharves, careful not to let the bodies touch the sides of the boat. Some nights, he thinks he hears whispers, faint, wet voices carried from the water. Other nights, nothing but the lapping of waves against the hull, steady and indifferent. The river smells of iron, rot, and decay. It is no longer a source of life. It is a vessel of memory. Every eddy, every swirl, seems to remember those who have fallen into it, dragging them along its current. Sometimes he thinks he can see them. A gloved hand, a shoe, the glint of a coin lost long ago, floating just beneath the surface before vanishing into the darkness. On the north bank, a small group of women gathers, shawls drawn tight, baskets in hand. They are here for food or water or news, though none of it seems reliable. They move cautiously, whispering to one another about missing relatives, bodies carried off in the night, and the invisible hand of the fever that reaches across rooftops and alleys to strike anyone in its path. The ferryman watches them from the boat, gripping the oar tightly, knowing that in a city where death moves as silently as the fog, anyone could vanish before their eyes. He pushes the boat into the center of the river. The water is unnaturally still here, and the fog wraps around at him like a living thing. The Thames exhales slowly, a long, hollow breath that carries the scent of the dead and the living alike. Somewhere beneath the surface, a crate shifts. He leans over the edge, heart hammering. Nothing surfaces, but the weight beneath the water presses against him, a quiet insistence that he is only a visitor in this domain. He drifts toward London Bridge, the arches dark and silent. The city beyond is muted, the streets empty, the windows shuttered, smoke curls lazily from chimneys, and in the distance a bell tolls uneven, irregular, swallowed quickly by the fog. The river breathes again, a slow and patient rhythm, as if counting the city's remaining heartbeats. By midday, he reaches the wharf. The sun, a weak, grey glow, struggles to pierce the mist. He ties the boat and climbs the steps slowly, feeling the cold seep through his boots. Behind him, the river continues to flow, carrying everything that the city can no longer hold: refuse, ash, sorrow, and the weight of countless lives swallowed beneath its black surface. He pauses on the embankment, looking back. The Thames is motionless again, smooth as glass, reflecting the pale, fogged sky. Somewhere, faintly, it exhales once more, as if sighing in resignation. The last breath of the river carries the memory of a city gasping beneath the fog. The river itself, a witness to the devastation, patient, unyielding, and endless. The streets of Stepney are quiet now, but not entirely empty. Amid the fog and ash, a few children move like shadows, cautious, thin, and alert. They have learned to navigate the city without drawing attention, slipping between alleys, climbing over debris, following the sound of water, or the faint whistle of a cart to mark the path of safety. They carry nothing but what they can hold in their small hands: scraps of bread, a piece of cloth, a doll missing an arm, a pebble with sentimental weight. Among them is Lucy Harrow, 10 years old, who has learned to read the city by its smells: the sour tang of spoiled meat, the metallic bite of iron from the river, the sweetness of fallen fruit fermenting in the gutters. Her brother, Michael, is 12 and moves slightly ahead of her, scanning the streets for danger. Their mother and father are gone, taken in quick succession by the fever that swept through their neighborhood. They have survived by following patterns, by knowing when to move and when to stay hidden. by trusting only one another. This morning, the fog is thick, curling into the corners of buildings like smoke. Lucy clutches a scrap of wool around her shoulders, wishing it could keep the chill and the sickness away. Michael leads her toward a small market square, now abandoned except for a few carts that sit empty, their drivers gone or ill. The bell above the church tolls once, distant and faint, and Lucy flinches. The sound has become a signal of death or warning, depending on who survives to hear it. They find a small piece of bread in the ruins of a bakery, damp but edible. Lucy tears it into halves, giving one to Michael, and they eat quickly, crouched behind a toppled barrel. Her stomach growls, but she ignores it. Hunger is a companion now, familiar and unfeeling. She looks across the square and sees the fog pressing against the windows of the shuttered shops. Shapes shift within shadows, perhaps, or the bodies of those who have already been claimed. She does not look for long. When the afternoon comes, they move again. They pass a house with the door ajar. Inside, the silence is almost unbearable. A candle flickers weakly, but the floor is empty. Lucy remembers her friend Thomas, who lived here gone, carried away by the fever, leaving only his favorite toy behind. She steps past quickly, as if her feet might disturb the memory. Michael does not look back. He keeps moving, a protector in a city stripped of guardians. By evening, they reach the edge of the river, where the fog lifts slightly. The Thames is black and still, a mirror for the pale sky. Lucy kneels, dipping her hands into the water, hoping the chill will remind her that she is still alive, that some part of the city has not yet been claimed. Michael kneels beside her, holding a broken lantern. They do not speak, because words seem fragile here, and the fog carries sound too easily. When night falls, they find a safe corner beneath a collapsed building, curling together for warmth. Lucy presses the piece of bread between them, the last remnants of sustenance, and closes her eyes. She dreams not of home, which no longer exists, but of a place where the fog is gone and birds sing again. Somewhere in London, the city breathes quietly, carrying the ghosts of the dead and the faint, stubborn pulse of the children who survived. And for one night, Lucy and Michael are part of that pulse, alive, small and defiant, in a world that has forgotten how to nurture the living. London wakes slowly, though it is not truly waking. The streets are pale and silent, the fog thick enough to make the horizon vanish. Chimneys smoke weakly. The air is heavy with coal, ash, and the faintest traces of the fever that has claimed so much of the city's life. Yet amidst the desolation, the city breathes. Not with laughter or commerce, not with the rhythm of carts and footsteps, but with a steady, quiet pulse, the pulse of survival. In the narrow alleys of Whitechapel, the few remaining souls emerge cautiously. Children who survived scavenge for bread, their eyes wide, alert, scanning the emptiness for danger. Adults move like shadows, carrying what remains of their families, whispering names that may no longer have anyone to answer. The city has grown quieter than a churchyard, yet it does not lie still. Life clings stubbornly, hidden beneath rubble, behind boarded windows, beneath the pale fog that coils like breath along every street. On the Thames embankment, the river flows thick and dark, carrying with it the remnants of a world that the city has lost. Floating crates, debris, and sometimes bodies drift lazily on its surface, testament to the toll of weeks past. And yet the water moves, tirelessly, obedient to gravity and tide. London leans above it, fragile but upright, its reflection broken and mottled by the fog. In the heart of the city, the market squares are empty, except for the faint clatter of a cart delivering what little supplies remain. Vendors who survived stand at shuttered stalls, eyes wary, glancing down narrow alleys. The air carries the scent of damp and rot, of bread and coal, of human breath mingling with the residue of countless deaths. The city itself is a ledger of loss, every street a record, every building a monument to lives extinguished and stubbornly remembered. Above the rooftops, pigeons have begun to return, tentative and cautious. Their wings beat silently against the fog. a subtle reminder that life endures, even in the smallest, most fragile forms. In the gardens that remain behind workhouses, shoots of green poke through frost-hardened soil, fragrant and sharp in contrast to the muted grey of the streets. London, though scarred and diminished, finds a way to endure. At the Tower of St. Paul's, a bell tolls again. The sound is thin, uneven and strange, not a signal of ritual or service, but a reminder. It echoes through the fog, bouncing from the walls of the deserted squares, carried across rooftops. A heartbeat in the hollow chest of the city, and somewhere in the alleyways, in hidden rooms and empty churches, survivors pause to listen, remembering what the toll once meant, recognizing that it now marks both grief and resilience. As evening falls, the fog thickens, curling around the buildings like a protective veil. The city exhales a long, quiet sigh. It has witnessed terror, death, and despair, yet it remains. Houses lean, chimneys smoke, and streets stretch endlessly, each one holding memory, sorrow, and the faint, stubborn pulse of life. London has forgotten much, yet it has not forgotten to endure. The children who survived, the streets that remain, the river that carries both refuse and hope, all testify to a city that refuses to lie completely in the grave. And as the fog presses closer, as the night deepens, London breathes still a city, scarred, silent, yet alive, holding its heart beneath the ashes, waiting, patient and unbroken, in the wake of the plague,